OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It is 7:30 on this Wednesday morning, and you are very welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Nathan with you right the way through until 10 o'clock today, and another fairly stacked show for you, to say the least. I'm delighted to say we're going to be joined by Cody a little bit later on for our Now TV Culture Hall of Fame. She's a former basketball player. She is more recognisable now, though, as an R&B artist, and has been one of the biggest voices on Black Lives Matter in this country. We're going to be chatting with Cork hurler Shane Kingston as well about what it's like to get coached by your dad. Graham Hunter will be with us to look ahead to La Liga's return tomorrow, and our best case, worst case Premier League previews move on to Crystal Palace, Everton and Leicester today. Nathan Murphy, you must feel like all your Christmases have come at once. You've got Premier League next week, golf back tomorrow, a 3-day stint on OTB AM to further your profile. What more could you ask for?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to be on the rest of the week to get myself in order for what's to come. Starting with the PGA Tour, Thursday night, Colonial. Going to sit down, going to relax, might have myself a nice glass of red wine once the show is over. On Thursday evening, McIlroy, Koepka, Ram. Bring it on.
Yeah.
And then a nice little relaxing weekend. You know, taking in what La Liga, taking in what Serie A I can, while keeping on top of the golf before it all properly kickstarts. Next Wednesday night, live here and Off the Ball, Man City, Arsenal, and then we got pretty much every big game between then and the end of the season, and we got live matches pretty much every day of the week on the television, so it's going to be hard to switch off from the Premier League, which no bad thing. I enjoy watching pretty much whatever Premier League match I can. Even Burnley against Watford, I'll put up with it.
For how long?
I think probably till the end of the season. I understand, and I heard Johnny and Dan talking about possible overload and that the novelty will wear off of watching potentially a Burnley, say, Crystal Palace game that's a dead rubber. But you don't have to watch it. You know, you can switch off whenever the hell you want. But these are the sort of games, if they were on at 12:30 on a Saturday, I'd probably find myself watching it. It's hard to know, like, how much of a life is getting back to normal a little bit more. I do have a Premier League obsessed 7-year-old who is even more excited than I am, and who would quite literally watch every single match, who has spent a good chunk of the last 3 months watching repeats of Match of the Day from earlier in the season. So
that's another level.
Every weekend was a constant row of, is he allowed to watch all 3 matches on a Saturday? And generally there'd be a bit of a fight about that. And also it was fine because he was in school, so he wasn't allowed to stay up late to watch the evening matches in the Champions League or the Monday night game. Whereas now, actually, everything's a bit more loose. So he's going down to, can I sit up and watch this one? Can I sit up and watch this one? So that's my excuse as well. I have backup now.
And who does he support?
Wolves.
Oh, right. Wow,
He's flaky. 7-year-olds are flaky. The one thing you find with kids in football, and they don't listen to our show too often, I'd imagine, they're not too bothered about the drama around football. They just like players. So they like watching YouTube. So the reason he supports Wolves is that he started watching a YouTube video of Ruben Neves.
Right.
All Ruben Neves does is score goals from 25 yards out. So he got himself a Ruben Neves jersey for his birthday. He was a Liverpool fan for a while, but it's all players. Everything is players. He had a little party trick that I was trying to get him to go viral at the very start of this, where he could give every single score of the Premier League season so far.
And how close did he get?
Oh no, he was pretty much there.
Right.
And could give every Wolves and Liverpool score with the goal scorer, but he was just a bit too shy to do it in front of the camera. So I'm like, what's the point of having this talent? You know, if I can't get myself some likes on Twitter from it. He wasn't having any of it, unfortunately. So it's all, everything is, he could name every player in the Premier League, but probably couldn't tell you any of the managers, has no interest. And you listen to him and his mates talking about football, they've no interest in managers. They couldn't care less about tactics. It's all Ruben Neves, Jamie Vardy, Aubameyang, Mo Salah. It's just the players. They love Pogba. You know, it's not a John Giles footballing conversation you're having with them. It's all who looks good on YouTube, who has the best compilations on YouTube.
I can't believe there's an even more terrifying version of Nathan Murphy coming down the line. It's incredible. It's interesting that Wolves is the one that's selected. Like, I mean, as interesting individual players, I can just imagine on FIFA that kids are like, well, Adama Traore has the highest in the pace bar, and I would like to sign him for my team, whatever I'm playing with. Is that what they do on? I don't know. Maybe I would like to get his ultimate team card or something like that. It is interesting how it's completely.
He's too young for FIFA. It's all still match attacks.
Okay.
But Wolves are an interesting team, and there's a lot of different sort of personalities there, whether it's, as you say, the pace of Adama Traore or like Raul Jimenez. He's a big fan of Raul Jimenez as well. And I was like, get Matt Doherty on the back of your jersey. Come on, he's Irish. No interest. There's no bias towards his home players here at all. So yeah, it's a bit worrying in one way.
Well, it's encouraging, just from my perspective, that match attacks are the way forward, because I was going to suggest that we all got into players individually because of sticker books, and I was like, well, that's a ridiculous thing to say in the year 2020, but I mean, they're the exact same thing, just without a sticker book.
They are the exact same thing. They were the bane of my life for quite a while. It was fine though, because they were obsessed with Pokemon cards, and anyone who was young kids would know Pokemon cards are quite expensive. There's some sort of a racket going on with them, I'm fairly sure. They're about €5 a packet. Oof. Whereas then when they move on to match attacks, it's like €1 a packet.
Okay.
So it's just fine. But I don't know if there's the same difficulties in getting the best players in match attack. It feels like every single match attack that they open, you get Mo Salah or Raheem Sterling 100 club. I'm not sure who the guy is that nobody can get ever. Or like, he seems to have lots of shiny, silvery Paul Pogba ones. So where's the guy that nobody can get? Do you remember when you were able to write off and you could purchase extra stickers?
Yeah, I did that.
But I was never allowed. Did you do it? I was never allowed to do that.
Once.
I did have the swap shops in Dublin. And I begged my parents, bring me up to the RDS to go to the swap shop. And they just never let me do it. But match attacks, I'm not sure. I think you seem to get it fairly straightforward. I couldn't figure out how to play match attacks for quite a while.
How do you play it? Go on, give us a quick breakdown.
This is the clip now. It's going to be old man talking about match attacks. And, well, actually, what we do, because the lads on, is it F2 they're called? They were in studio. Were you talking to them?
F2 freestylers.
F2 freestylers. So they do something where basically you blow up your match attacks, you can print them off, and then you attach them to your goal. So all my kids do is they might draw a picture of their player. So it could be Mo Salah, and you put up 9 different A4 size pages and you sellotape them to your goal, and then you basically have to do a class volley and hit one of them.
That's not bad.
That's up against each other. Or you do, the simplest way of doing it is you pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, and 3 forwards, and 5 forwards, and you turn them over. You pick your defender up against their forward. Who is better attacking? Who is better defense? And then you see who gets over. 8 wins.
That sounds like a really creative way and not too bad way to actually have fun. Like, is this? Are you seeing the video game era coming down the tracks and saying, "God, no, this is"?
Yes. 100%. Like, I'd say this time next year it'll be. He hasn't watched a Premier League match, but he's played 18 hours of FIFA just there yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think I've just stumbled into a dadcast conversation, which you can have it for free, folks. You can talk about that some other day. It is 7:38 on this Wednesday morning. We are going to get to Kenny Cunningham in just a moment. If you want to get in touch, you can tweet us at Off the Ball or comment on the stream below if you happen to be watching on YouTube or on Facebook. But as I say, Kenny Cunningham on last night's football show, and he discussed captaincy with Joe Malloy.
Wayne Rooney wrote a piece in the Sunday Times about captaincy. So Wayne Rooney's been writing for the Sunday Times for a while now, Kenny, and each week he picks a different topic. One week it was unsung heroes, and he wrote about players like Ji-Sung Park and how they're so important. Another week it was about the art of being a striker, and he talked about various aspects of being a striker. And at the weekend he wrote about captaincy, the way captaincy has changed, the different types of captains he played under. I know you had a glance at the piece as well. So I wanted to pick your brain on a few things. Captaincy has different levels of importance in different footballing countries and different leagues. You were captain, as far as I know, so certainly under Brian Kerr for Ireland, and then at Birmingham under Steve Bruce. Were you captain elsewhere as well?
Yeah, I would have been. I would have been captain at Wimbledon the last couple of years at Wimbledon before I moved up to Brum. Yeah, I would have been. Yeah, I can't remember what age it was. It would have been kind of maybe mid to late 20s, probably, when I got the captaincy to Wimbledon. And then, I would have captained at Birmingham after that, Joe, and for a short period up at Sunderland, maybe my last year. So, Yeah, I suppose maybe for that second period of my career, I was lucky enough to carry the armband, yeah.
I get a feel for what you do on the pitch. Tell me about captaincy off the pitch and how important the role is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a degree of importance attached to it, Joe. I think it can be dependent on the makeup of the squad, to be honest with you. You can walk into some dressing rooms and it's a very kind of experienced, kind of battle-hardened group of players, where really the role of the manager or the captain may not be a particularly important or an influential one, because you've got so many leaders, experienced players, vocal players maybe in the dressing room anyway. Whereas you might find yourself, which I did at times during my career, in a dressing room with a very young average age of players. I remember at Wimbledon when we got relegated after the period of time, a lot of maybe the older players on the big earners would have left. And we obviously started the following year in the championship, a very young group of players, quite talented actually, with a core group of players like, I think it was Nigel Rio-Coker, kind of Joby McAnuff, Jason Ewell, players like Damien Francis. Those names may register with a few people, but very talented, but very young group of players. And that dynamic was slightly different. I think in that kind of situation where you've got young players, quite immature, and from a personal point of view in terms of their football and knowledge and kind of are developing as people and players, then maybe your role becomes a little bit more influential in that respect. So I think it's kind of dependent to some extent on the makeup of the on the dressing room, but I think the basic kind of fundamentals are the same, I think.
Like Rooney talked about different things. For one thing, he said you're often the link between players and management. He wrote, at one club, I was asked to go and tell the manager his training sessions were not good enough. Now, that's not an easy one, he said. Excuse me, Gaffer, the lads think your training's shit. So would you, when you were captain, have been the go-to man for the manager? He would sound you out and how the dressing room's feeling. Equally, if the dressing room weren't happy with things, was a captain's job to communicate that?
Yeah, I think it would be, but I think it can be overplayed that. I think the relationship with the manager, I think it helps if you have a healthy relationship with the manager, kind of lines of communication are their job. But for me, the relationship with the dressing room and your teammates was the most important one as a captain. I always felt that was, if you got on with the manager, all well and good. If you could have those kind of conversations, where you the go between, yeah, of course you were, but generally speaking, they're quite trivial things, Joe. And in the general, the general consensus, they weren't overly that important, quite kind of meaningless stuff at times in terms of travel and this and that. The really thing's a little bit different. Going up and tell your manager, like, the coaching's crap, like, you know what I mean? It's not good enough. That's a little bit more delicate. I understand that. But generally speaking, it was kind of trivial stuff you'd go to the manager with, which is quite unimportant, to be honest with you. So for me, like a captain, the only relationship that mattered was really with the group that you had that you had to respect the players. That was the most important thing. And I remember once reading a comment, there was a quote, and I think it was attributed to Bobby Robson. I think he was asked not so much the importance of the captain, but how he's viewed amongst the players, something of that, the question of that ilk, like, and he responded. It was quite a simple thing he said. He said, well, I think the most important thing as the captain, he says, is when you speak to the players, your words carry weight. And that was it, really. So it was quite a simple thing, like, but the more I thought about it, the more it kind of resonated, like, you know what I mean? And because you start thinking, well, if your words carry weight, what does that actually mean, your words carry? It's not just the fact players every player listens to their captain, but words that actually resonate, they take on board, and it actually has a kind of they act upon them, and it actually has a positive effect. Why would they do that for one captain and not another? So that makes it a little bit more interest. And then you have to think about, well, does respect play a part in how the players view the captain, how he presents himself, the type of person that he is? Do they trust him? Has he kind of got their back? How he carries himself, how he treats people, and we haven't even spoken about his qualities as a player yet. All of those things then maybe become talking points. But I always thought that was an interesting one when I heard Robson speak. I thought it was kind of very astute what he said. It kind of stayed with me a little bit, because I always felt really the armband was nothing. If you didn't really have the respect of the players, simple as that. And when I say the respect, I mean really more as a human being, really. If you didn't have that, really, for me, the armband was kind of, it was meaningless. It was pure like tokenism. You know, it was no point of wearing it, really. Like, so, yeah. So that was. So, I mean, I've never really spoken. It was never a big topic conversation. What makes a great captain and what doesn't? But I think there's certainly facets to it. If I had to break it down, I think there's certain kind of boxes that you would tick in terms of what would constitute maybe the perfect captain. People see it differently, of course, and certain players respond to kind of different things in people. I understand that, but I think generally speaking, there's certain attributes there which kind of do make up what most people consider to be maybe kind of perfect captain material.
I guess being captain of the country is an extra honour, an extra responsibility. You're representing the country. You're of a select number of people, really. In the last 100 years, how many captains of Ireland have we had? It's an ambassadorial role. It's a role of importance. You know, everyone knows who the Irish rugby and football captain is around the country. They just know. Did any of those things cross your mind when you were made Ireland captain? Did that feel like an extra honour, or do you stop and think about those things when you're a player? Maybe you don't. Maybe
not stopping. It was a huge honour. It was the proudest moment of me.
Do you remember how you were asked or told?
Yeah. And Mick's on the coach. So we were just after a training session. We were jumping off the coach, and Mick just held the coach for 10 seconds and just announced that I was captain, and the lads were. No, it was actually a round of applause. I think was the lads were throwing bottles of water at me, etc., and all that type of thing. But yeah, but it was.
And he had spoken to you in advance of that, I presume.
No, I don't think so. No, he hadn't actually. No, he hadn't. No, so yeah, so that was pretty much the pinnacle. Of course, it was. But I was very proud of it. It's slightly different, Joe. I think the captaincy at international level, club level. I mean, really club level.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just get my head around this for a second? So, wait, when is this? What year is this again that you're made captain?
It would have been after. I'm guessing it would have been. Well, it would have been just after the World Cup, Joe. Wouldn't it? 02. So it would have been maybe the first friendly game or something.
Okay.
August maybe, because Mick wasn't around too long. He made me captain. And
so you're sitting on the bus with everyone, and Mick steps up to announce the captaincy, and you're looking around to see who it is as well, are you?
Yeah, but it wasn't a case of a drum roll like everybody's looking around.
Was it like an X Factor thing? Did he tell people who weren't? You're not the captain. Next.
He got the name out pretty quick. But to be honest with you, he could have easily picked at least half a dozen players. When you get to that level, international level, that kind of elite level, Joe, we captains are literally. I know it's a cliche thing. Sure. We captains all over the pitch, but we literally had. Gary Breen was club captain, Mark Kinsella, Matty Holland, respective club captains. Clearly, Roy, obviously, Robbie went on to be club. Gary Kelly, all of these players. So we'd captains all over the pitch.
No, I get that. But so for a second, he announces, because I've never heard you talk about this, he announces this, bottles of water, bit of slagging, and then it calms down for a second. Tell me how you're feeling on the rest of that bus ride home, because I'm sure you're thinking, I'm going to call people in my family. It is an amazing honour.
No, I wasn't on the phone calling people or anything like that. No, it wasn't.
You just didn't tell anyone, did you not?
One of those things, you feel it inside. You're just immensely proud, like, you know what I mean? So, no, it wasn't a big thing. Get into the hotel and had a shower and got on with things, and that was it, you know what I mean? But you talk about maybe a weight of responsibility. I wouldn't even say that so much, because I was in a very privileged position there. And so I've always said it with Ireland, just in terms of quality of players you have around you, in terms of technically how good they were, in terms of the personalities, characters. So those players made things very easy for me, forgetting about the captain's armband, for putting that to the side, you know. So that was a very, the environment I was in, you know, I was very fortunate. You know, we all helped each other out. Although I say international football is different to club football, of course it is, Joe, but that was probably as close as you get. Those times in the Irish international setup are probably as close as you're going to get in terms of having that kind of club mentality and being as close as we were during that period of time under Mick and even Brian. So we're very fortunate in that respect. And the captaincy was made easy. The players made it made it easy for those reasons. They really did. I was just very conscious of the fact that, look, my performance levels, people say in terms of captaincy, I've heard people say, does he have to be the best player in the team? And I don't think he has to be the best player in the team, but I think it helps, because I think when people think of it...
Did it help you being the best player in the team, do you think?
Clearly I didn't fall into that category. I don't think I even fell into the middle group of players. I was clearly towards the runt of the litter in that respect. But I don't think he has to be the best player, but I think it helps, because a player who can give that kind of lead, not just leadership on the pitch, but kind of inspiration at times in terms of just performance levels, Joe. Somebody who can maintain a high level of performance, game in, game out, whether it's at club or international level. That's actually hugely inspiring as a player, to see your teammate achieve those levels. If it's a centre forward who's captain, he's knocking in the goals. If it's a central midfielder who's imposing himself in that area of the pitch, he's controlling the game, the rhythm of the game. If it's a centre half, he's that imperious presence at the back, mopping everything up, whatever it is. Goalkeeper, brilliant, can't be beaten in the goal. I think that's the kind of ideal if you're actually that good. But I think not everybody, certainly I wasn't fortunate enough to have those skills. So obviously you're looking at a level, you need to maintain a certain, I was very conscious of the fact I needed to maintain a certain level of performance, game in, game out, no exceptions really. Kind of focus had to be right, and just concentration levels. I just had to maintain that level, that kind of 6.5, 7 out of 10, game to game. The very minimum I needed to produce that. So that was it. I was very conscious. Conscious of that, and clearly that's the factor. Some people say that's the biggest factor as a captain. All that matters is what you do on the pitch on match day. 3 o'clock to 4:45. That's it. That's what it's all about. But for me, it was more than that. I can understand why people make that argument. For me, a good captain for me earned the spurs as well. Maybe before the game, halftime, and even after the game. Joe, in terms of, it wouldn't have to be a constant ranter, prior to the game, constantly talking, etc. But when the moment was right at the appropriate time, maybe just might be some words prior to the game. Certainly at half time, where always impressed me, Joe, was a player who would come into the dressing room, maybe come in after the first half. The team hasn't played well, you haven't been functioning correctly, and before the manager or the coach stood up to speak, the captain would step up. And he'd say, and it wouldn't be a shouting and screaming match. It wouldn't be a case of this is rubbish, that's crap, you're crap, we're better than this. All of those standard kind of cliches, which by and large really don't work. Players hear them far too often, has very little effect. But a player who could stand up, and predominantly a captain, who could stand up and say, listen, lads, that's not good enough. And these are the reasons why. 1, back 4, 10 yards too deep. We need to get ourselves higher up the pitch. Centre midfielders taking too many touches on the ball, too slow. Let's move the balls quickly. 2 centre forwards too far apart. You've got to be closer. Wingers, keep yourself as close to the touchline as you can. Spread the pitch across. Fullbacks, get your crosses earlier into the box. Our centre forwards are making runs. The ball's not arriving. So somebody who could actually analyse the game, despite the fact they've been part of it and the game's been happening all around them, but had kind of the football and intelligence, was clever enough to see where the actual problems were, come into the dressing room and very calmly offer that information to other players. I found that hugely impressive. That doesn't happen too often. So for me, a captain as well kind of earned the spurs at those moments immediately, I'd say, prior to the game. Might have been a motivational speak of sorts at times. Certainly at half-time, which is always the key moment of the game. After the game is too late, the game's over. Damage may be done. But those moments as well as kind of the influence on the pitch, those moments for me in and around the game were very much, that was a factor for me as well. And probably the last factor then is actually how you carried yourself around the club, around the training pitch during the week, in the hotel with the players or wherever you were travelling together. Kind of how you kind of interacted with the players, with the group, and what kind of environment you helped to create with the manager, coaches and everybody else. But that kind of healthy, nurturing environment at the football club where really every player enjoys coming into training, enjoys each other's company, enjoys the training, enjoys working hard, feels as if they're in an environment where they can kind of really progress and be themselves and open up, not be too concerned if I make a mistake, I'm going to get a criticism here. He's going to come for me, and he doesn't like me, he's going to come for me, I better be careful, you're on edge a little bit. So that was the third part for me.
Yeah.
And probably something which isn't spoken about a huge amount.
But it's something I could see you being very good at, because even your natural personality, even when you come in here, and I don't know if it's a conscious thing that you do or not, or it's just a habit of a lifetime, but when you come in here, you will say hello to everyone out in the office. There might be 10 lads sitting around doing work on their PCs, conversation, bringing different people into the conversation, firing a slag or a bit of crack around the place and lifting the general mood, so that's something, again, I don't know if you're conscious of, but that I can see you being very good at as captain. Can I ask you, and apologies if you've been asked this before and it's not, the point of this conversation, but it is a very specific one to you when it comes to captaincy, because I wouldn't envy this if I was in your situation where when Roy comes back and you're Ireland captain and then you're kept on as Ireland captain, and, he's such a unique kind of figure, and there's been the fallout from O2, and is Roy captain, is he not captain, blah blah blah, everyone's talking about it. Was that delicate / uncomfortable for you? Do you remember the time?
Yeah, I do remember the time. I won't betray too many confidences. Obviously I had conversations with Brian about it. Brian was very active behind the scenes in getting Roy back into the squad. That took a little bit of time, and kind of understandably so, and he kind of took me into his confidence a little bit, Brian, and that was appreciated. He didn't have to, to a certain extent, it wasn't largely my business. That was kind of Brian's decision he made, but for understandable reasons, for Roy's qualities. But you are right, it was a little bit delicate, him coming back into the squad. I did have a conversation with Brian about it, and what I did say to him, I'll be honest with you, it's not a massive big secret. I did say to him, look, Brian, there's no issue with me if Roy comes back and he comes back as captain of the team. I had no problem with that whatsoever. I mean, Eoin never came into it. Like I explained to you, I was immensely proud to lead a team. But the way I interacted with the players and around the squad, it didn't really matter if I had the armband or not. I wouldn't change how I kind of worked with the players and kind of relationship that I had with the players. So I'd no problem with that. I suppose the only issue, being perfectly honest, I suppose the only thing that was in the back of my mind with Roy coming back as captain potentially was how it would be viewed by the rest of the players. Because I think, generally speaking, the players are more than happy for Roy to come back for obvious reasons, Joe. But to come back and immediately come back as captain of the team, having been out of the team for a period, and obviously the circumstances how we left the squad. I mean, I don't know. I didn't speak to players individually about this. It wasn't really my business, to be fair. That was down to Brian was the manager, and he had to make a decision. But Brian was very astute with things like this, and I'd be very surprised if Brian didn't give a little bit of thought to the effect, the perception amongst the players, not Roy coming back. That was pretty obvious, but actually coming back as captain. And maybe, there's some experienced players there in the squad as well, and maybe how that would be perceived, maybe amongst a couple of the players. Now, that's only me speculating. And if maybe Brian felt, great to have Roy back in the team, the boys would love to see him back, but to bring him back and immediately to bring him back and put the armband on his arm, he might have given some thought in terms of how that would be perceived by maybe a couple of the players. So I think that's probably the only reason maybe why Roy didn't get the armband. Was he deserving of it? Obviously so, because of the type of player that he was. But me personally, I had absolutely no problem. That wasn't because the armband didn't matter to me. Of course it was. It was a huge honour. But it was, in that circumstance, it didn't matter. I certainly wasn't going to kick up a fuss. That was the right thing. If Brian decided that was the right thing, that's the avenue he wanted to go around, I would have had no problem with it. And I'm sure the players would have rallied around Roy and we would have got on with it. But he didn't. He made Brian made his decision. I'm not exactly sure how Roy felt about it. I don't know if he's mentioned it. I know he's done a couple of books. I'm not sure if he's mentioned it. I haven't kind of read them, but
he did. He said he was a bit surprised he wasn't made captain, but I don't think he kicked up major fuss about it either. You know, he didn't say it was a disgrace or anything like that. He said it was.
No, not at all. No, I can understand that. I think that's fair. I'd been surprised if he wasn't surprised that he wasn't made captain, because we all know the reasons why. But if you're asking me why not, Brian would obviously be the.
No, the logic makes sense. I mean, you bring him back, but you don't want to overdo things or put anyone's nose at a joint. They were very specific circumstances. And did you feel in any way self-conscious as captain with Roy there, or a little bit queasy about it, or were you able to just get on with the job and still enjoy the job the way you had when he'd been out of the squad?
Queasy when I walked into the room, to be honest. When he was captain and not captain. No, I suppose maybe there was maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of that. You know what I mean? And
it'd be very natural given who he was.
Yeah, it was and you know Roy's kind of presence around the place anyway. Yeah, you know what I mean. He could make things great. Roy could be great around the place. Don't get me wrong, great sense of humour, very witty and things like that. Made it very easy around the dinner table. He could be great. The people and the lads would really love him, really enjoy his company. But there'd be times, and obviously that wouldn't be the case. You know what I mean? Maybe Roy wouldn't be as forthcoming. That kind of dark cloud would be over his head a little bit. That's just the way it was. Don't get me wrong. So I tried not to. I worked in my favour. I was a bit old at that stage, Joe. You know what I mean? I had a little bit more experience there. So those type of things. And maybe when I was younger, I hadn't got as much really kind of self-confidence, self-belief, those kind of things would have maybe knocked me a little bit. I wouldn't have been able to deal with that. But at that time, whenever I was 30-odd years of age, you know, in terms of your maturity levels as a person, more so really than as a footballer, you can kind of deal with those things a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know, I understand the question, but that was the reality of the situation. Brian made his decision. Roy accepted it. He never kind of spoke to me about it. I didn't speak to him. And we kind of made the best of it. We kind of, everybody knuckled down and got on with things, and that was it.
Very good, very interesting. Listen, good to talk to you again. So I'm sure I'll be talking to you in a couple of weeks. Well, the football's going to start pretty soon, so we'll probably be nagging you to talk about whatever matches you're watching at the weekend. In the meantime, for the next 8 days, what are you reading or watching? What's keeping you going, even though you're a bit bored? Yeah,
I've dialed down the Netflix a little bit, to be honest with you. Absolutely jumped in there 2-footed when the lockdown started. So yeah, I've had to wean me.
Steam coming out of Netflix, was there?
There was a little bit, to be honest with you. Well, funny enough, I suppose, a bit like everybody has, a couple of sports documentaries as well. Obviously, the Michael Jordan ones are very topical. That's very interesting, I suppose, in terms of captaincy and kind of leadership. I mean, that's probably a conversation in itself. But yeah, I've been up a little bit down me reading. Yeah, I've been through a couple of books, all right. I'm on a Joseph O'Connor book at the moment, but I'm out swinging the clubs at the moment, Joe. I'm back on. I've got the golf book back.
Good.
So that could be a good or bad thing. I'm not too sure. That game's got the ability to actually destroy it. So I'm hoping I'll keep swinging it reasonably well.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The question ultimately is, where do we go from here? I mean, where do we go from here?
OTB Sports Radio.
I drunk texted Joe Smith, "Tu sma Latin Hibra," and he obviously just threw it into Google Translate or something, because he's like, thanks Danny. Yeah, the first half was good actually.
Now broadcasting 24 hours a day, live on the Go Loud app, Alexa.
You have a whole new world of possibilities.
Google Home, tune in, and offtheball.com/radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
And get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back. If you've just joined us, you just missed a chat with Joe and Kenny Cunningham from last night. The full piece available now on the OTB podcast network or on youtube.com/off the ball. So Nathan, you've been causing a bit of a storm on social media last night. For people who weren't with us on OTB AM yesterday or who weren't on Twitter last night, what has been happening?
Well, obviously on OTB AM yesterday we picked our all-time Liverpool Premier League 11, myself and David Myler. There was a lot of general consensus. I think we had 9 of the same team. And the one debate was maybe about actually, if you look back over the last near 30 years of the Premier League, who was Liverpool's greatest player? David felt it was very straightforward, that it was Steven Gerrard. I made the argument that actually it was Virgil van Dijk, because Liverpool have never won the Premier League. They're about to in the next couple of weeks, and Virgil van Dijk is the reason for that. He's only at the club 2.5 seasons, but he's won them a Champions League, and he's won them a Premier League, and they're 25 points clear at the top of the table. And even though he doesn't have the longevity, and even with all Steven Gerrard did during his 15, 16 years of playing in the Premier League, what Van Dijk has done in the last 2.5 seasons for me puts him up as their greatest, most important Premier League player. David decided maybe a poll was the best. He decided to put it out to the people. Now, I would say, David, never put it out to the people. Never put it out to the people. It never ends well when you start asking people what their thoughts are. And it turns out that the people have sided with David Myler.
How heavily?
81% went for Steven Gerrard. It was one of those, and I'm sure you've had these, I'm sure you had it a lot when you were in Japan, where I was out for a while yesterday afternoon, hadn't looked at my phone, switched on my Twitter, and there's like 220 notifications, and you know something bad has happened. You're not getting 220 notifications for something positive. And so I'm scrolling down through, and it's a consistent level of abuse. I'm wondering, what is it? It's obviously something to do with Liverpool. How did this happen? So it was 81%, but I was surprised by a lot of the comments as to a lack of appreciation for Van Dijk. I understand he's only there 2.5 years, and I totally get the argument for Steven Gerrard, because longevity always comes into these sort of conversations. But that's like a lot of Liverpool supporters, it seems, would have Van Dijk below Salah, Torres, Suarez in particular came up quite a lot. Like Suarez, you could argue, was Liverpool's most talented player, certainly most talented attacking player. But were any of those the best in the world at what they did while they were at the club? Whereas Virgil van Dijk has been consistently over the last couple of years. And maybe it's that I've been at Anfield and been to so many Liverpool games since he joined the club over the last 2.5 years. But I've never really seen him under any sort of pressure. Like, we've seen time and time again, he can outpace anybody. He doesn't even get into a battle usually with centre forwards. Sort of warns them off getting into any sort of a battle. So I'd be shocked if there was a lack of appreciation for Virgil van Dijk. But yeah.
How much is this to do with the fact that Steven Gerrard is this untouchable quantity in the recent history of Liverpool Football Club?
Oh, a lot. He is, the two players in English football who you cannot criticise are Steven Gerrard and Roy Keane. And I wasn't even being critical of Steven Gerrard. With this, when you're talking about greatness, you're ranking one above the other. So much like a few weeks ago when I compared Roy
You've had a
Keane,
fun few weeks.
When I compared Roy Keane miscontrolling the ball, which led to his yellow card, with Steven Gerrard miscontrolling the ball, which led to him costing Liverpool the title. And I had every Manchester United supporter outraged that you could compare Roy Keane and Steven Gerrard in any way. In any way.
Well, actually, while you were on holidays, Nathan, we kind of doubled down on that take, actually, because funnily enough, so for context here, for people who didn't see it, we did a Classic Game Club on the 99 Champions League semi-final, which of course involved Gerrard's yellow card, missed the final. And then we also did one on Istanbul a couple of weeks later, where the same kind of conversation came up, because Keane was obviously so brilliant after the yellow card in Turin that night, and Steven Gerrard, after going 3 goals down, was sensational in Istanbul that night. And to even proceed with an argument comparing those two performances seemed like sacrilege in certain corners.
Particularly in Ireland, when it comes to Roy Keane and saying anything about Roy Keane. I think Roy Keane was a greater player than Steven Gerrard. A totally different type of player. It's comparing apples and oranges. Like, Keane, his influence, his ability to control the game. Gerrard was arguably far more talented, but there was a lot more talented players than Roy Keane, but none of them had what he had, and his drive and his determination and his ability to run a game from the middle of midfield. Gerrard was more explosive. There was more shock and awe. He had probably more big individual moments. But it is so parochial when you get down to it. Like, a lot of the comments I had last night were, like, Steven Gerrard's not Liverpool's greatest player. He's without question the greatest player of the Premier League era.
Right.
Which, to be honest, is an absolute nonsense. Like, Steven Gerrard, brilliant player, a great player in his own right. Not as good as Virgil van Dijk over the course of the Premier League era. But there is and maybe it's a great thing that clubs defend their players to the hilt, but it's Gerrard and Keane in particular. Like, we could sit here for an hour and debate the greatness of Ryan Giggs. And you look at his trophies, and it's an interesting debate as to, like, Ryan Giggs for all he achieved. A lot of people wouldn't have him in Manchester United's all-time 11. Yes, you should say on longevity and success that he is their greatest ever player. And I don't think he'd get a huge amount of interaction. I don't think anyone gets overly upset as to where Ryan Giggs ranks. Whereas Roy Keane, Steven Gerrard, what it did remind me, and I've thought this a lot over the last while when it comes to the Premier League returning, and United fans won't agree. Thank Christ Liverpool are 25 points clear at the top of the league. Can you imagine, worst case scenario, if Liverpool were 3 points clear of Manchester United and there was any possibility of the season not ending? What life would be like? Dear God.
It's
wow.
true. It's a good point. Shane Hannon is also with us. Good morning, Shane.
Morning, lads. Tell you what, 220 notifications. Those are the types of numbers, Eoin, that get you on the Murray tweet index, I think. Close to the top 50.
I can't believe we've had Nathan Murphy on the show for 3 mornings straight, and we haven't even mentioned the Murray tweet index until now. We might get a mention of that later, but Shane, what's your take on that? Like, how afraid would you be about upsetting Gerrard or Keane fans? They are, like, what I find interesting here, Shane, is what Nathan's mentioned about how people are actually coming out to really defend Steven Gerrard and say he is one of the best players of the Premier League era. This is not just an Irish problem where we are very protective of Roy Keane. This is just, as you say, probably yourself, Nathan, a parochial problem, defending your own club team almost. And I'm sure plenty of Liverpool fans were in those mentions saying that Gerrard was underrated by Nathan yesterday.
Well, I think you're gonna offend someone. I mean, Pat Nevin was on with us recently, and he had said something along. He basically said Steven Gerrard was the player he would prefer, but that if he was picking a team, Roy Keane is the player he would pick to win the game. So the article, I think, led along the lines of Gerrard being the player he prefers, and he got slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered online. Even if you read between the lines, he actually did say Roy Keane would be the player to win the game. So you can't really win in a Keane-Gerrard argument. You bring Scholes in then as well and you're in trouble. Lampard and you're in even more trouble. So you can't really win these arguments, and Nathan has stepped in it in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. Nathan, we may as well just get a quick word on your huge achievement the week before last, being named as the only OTB head in the top 100 tweeters in Ireland. How does it feel?
Oh, proud moment. A proud moment. I had a message when I woke up from Tommy Rooney saying, we want to talk to you about finishing 51st. And again, my mind is racing going, 51st? It doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound like they're bringing me on to actually congratulate me on something here. This missing out on the top 50 is a bitter pill to swallow. But being the only off-the-ball representative, I take a lot of pride in that.
As a Mayo man, being number 51 was rather fitting, I thought myself. And I know you like to draw comparisons. Shane, you've got a big interview with Nate Boyer this week. I'm not sure, do you want to start there or do you want to start with the news?
Yeah, I'll start there. I mean, the Nate Boyer, to those people who don't know who he is, he was quite prominent in Colin Kaepernick's story. So Cap obviously taking the knee in 2016, and Boyer is a former United States Army Green Beret. He served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan. He was a long snapper for the Seattle Seahawks as well for a very short time, for pre-season a few years ago. But really interesting guy, and kind of wrote an open letter to Kaepernick in 2016 in the Army Times newspaper when this whole thing started, and basically said to Kaepernick, I don't take any offence as a former military man to you wanting to, serve as a protest during the national anthem when the Star Spangled Banner is being played before games. But they sat down and had a meeting before a match then a couple of weeks later in San Diego. They talked things out. They had a really good conversation. And Boyer kind of advised him that maybe kneeling wasn't the best, was the best form of protest. He had been kind of sitting away on the bench away from his teammates. And he said, sitting close to your teammates and taking a knee might be the more respectful thing to do. We have a short clip here of Bowyer. I also spoke with Lamar Lewis. He's a former running back in the NFL, so he's a free agent at the moment, but a former teammate of Drew Brees as well with the New Orleans Saints. Loads of strong opinions on that, but the full interview's on youtube.com /off the ball. It's up on OTBsports.com as well, and the new app. But we have a short clip here of Nick Bowyer, so he explains here why he advised Kaepernick to take the knee.
No matter what you do, you're going to offend some people. That's just the way it is. And, you know, you've committed to not standing. So from my perspective, and I don't speak for anybody in the military, I speak for myself, but I think being alongside your teammates would be a good adjustment if you're willing to do that. And you know, taking a knee, I think looks more proactive. I've never seen that as a disrespectful act. You know, people take a knee to pray and to propose to their wives. And in the military, it's common for us to take a knee at Arlington, you know, in front of a fallen brother's grave to pay respect. So I said, I mean, I think that would be a good option if you're looking to do something else. And if you do that, I'll stand next to you, man. And he did. So that night he took a knee at that game, and it was crazy to hear the boos in the stands. That was what bothered me the most. I mean, nothing about his protest really bothered me, especially after talking to him. But it was just the reaction of people, and there's just a lot of hate in the country.
What did they say about Drew Brees, and what did Bowyer say about the negative reaction that then followed from the initial protest in, 2016?
Yeah, I mean, the protest kind of gathered arms and legs from there, and you had the political upheaval as well. You had people like Donald Trump kind of giving out about these people taking the knee, as he is to this day. But yeah, Lamar Lewis's comments on Drew Brees were very interesting. He put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago saying, you know, he had long conversations with Drew Brees when they were in the Saints locker rooms a couple of years ago, and long, in-depth intellectual conversations about race, what this meant. I mean, Drew Brees is a guy who has been around black men, and you know, for his entire career, from Pee Wee football right through to the NFL. So he's someone who possibly should have thought a little bit more about his comments, according to Lewis. And he felt they were insensitive. He felt Drew Brees didn't probably put enough thought into his comments around the flag. And I guess Nick Bowyer agreed. He said this wasn't a flag issue. It took away from the focus, which was, you know, social injustice and racial prejudice in America. So the fact that we were even talking about the flag was kind of taking away from the focus of what this whole thing was about, which was the Black Lives Matter protests. So yeah, really strong stuff from both Lamar Lewis and Nick Bowyer on the issue of race and how it permeates American society.
Good stuff. Well, you can get the full piece available on YouTube now, as Shane mentioned. You're starting with Michael O'Neill on the sports news front this morning.
Yes, so Manchester United forced to cancel a friendly with Stoke City yesterday evening. This is after the news that came through last night that Stoke manager Michael O'Neill has tested positive for coronavirus. Stoke had already arrived to United's Carrington Training Centre when the former Shamrock Rovers and Northern Ireland boss was informed of his positive result from a test that took place on Monday. United insist none of their players came in contact with O'Neill, and Stoke say their manager will now self-isolate. On the issue of coronavirus tests as well, the latest batch of COVID-19 tests at Dundalk, Derry City and Shamrock Rovers all returned negative. Bohemians players and staff were tested on Monday, and their results will be made known later on today. All four clubs, of course, due to play a mini tournament next month. Meanwhile, Lisbon is expected to host an 8-team tournament in August to complete this season's UEFA Champions League. UEFA is considering a plan to move the final from Istanbul and to finish out the competition in a single city. They're also likely to play the rest of this season's Europa League in Germany, with European football's governing body set to make a final decision on that by the 17th of June. Munster Rugby Chief Executive Ian Flanagan feels the province is in reasonable shape despite the huge challenges posed by the pandemic. He says revenue has stopped dead due to a lack of matchday income. The Pro 14 season is due to resume in late August with behind closed doors matches. Flanagan says they'll need to get back playing in front of crowds as soon as is possible. Cork GAA, meanwhile, considering streaming club championship games. They say a subgroup will look at the idea which would allow those who cannot attend to watch the matches. The county executive met last night to discuss formats for this year's club championship in the Rebel County. While the preference remains for a group stage championship, a final decision won't be made until the CCCC reveal formats for the inter-county championship. To soccer in France, France's highest court has ruled there should be no relegation from the country's top flight this season. That's after the campaign was ended early, of course, due to the coronavirus pandemic. It means Amiens and Toulouse will stay in Ligue 1 next season, with the division to be expanded to 22 teams. The court rejected an appeal from Lyon to restart the season. Ronnie O'Sullivan crashed out of snooker's Championship League last night. His 3-0 defeat to Stuart Bingham, the 2015 world champion, saw him finish third in Group C of the winner stage. Judd Trump in action in the next couple of days at that tournament as well. That's behind closed doors in Milton Keynes. There's an 8-race card at Navan as well this afternoon, lads. The first going to post there at 1 o'clock. I should mention as well, John Giles on the show last night, remembering his former Manchester United and indeed Republic of Ireland teammate Tony Dunn, who of course sadly passed away on Monday at the age of 78. Dunn joined United a few years after Giles went over in 1956, and he remembered Dunn as the best left back in Division 1 for 10 years. You can read John's full tribute to him up on OTBsports.com, or indeed the new OTB Sports app, which you can download for free right now via the App Store or Play Store.
Good stuff, Shane. Thanks for that. Coming up over the next 90 minutes, there's plenty. We've got Graham Hunter coming up very shortly to chat about the return of La Liga. We've got our best case, worst case scenarios for another 3 Premier League clubs. Shane Kingston will be on chatting about the return to hurling over the next couple of months. Erica Cody then is this week's guest on our Now TV OTB Culture Hall of Fame. Before all that, time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
And we will start with OTBsports.com. As you can see, there is our lineup for OTB AM this morning. A quote from Kenny Cunningham as well, criticising players' attitudes. Bring a sandwich with you, is his advice. It's the danger age, says John Giles, reflecting on friends passing and remembering Tony Dunn. A delicate situation then, more from Kenny Cunningham. That's how he described his relationship with Roy Keane when Keane came back while Kenny was still captain. And it pushed a new sort of fame onto those games. Paul Rouse on how television changed sport in Ireland. That is OTBsports.com.
Looking at the back pages of the newspapers then, the Irish Independent, this following up from a story that was in a couple of the papers yesterday. Croke Park set to host Ulster and Connacht football finals. Both provinces exploring the possibility of moving their big championship games to Croke Park later in the season. The Connacht Council Secretary John Prenty confirmed that they're already actively looking at Croke Park for the semi-finals and finals, again because Croke Park is the most likely to be able to hold some sort of a crowd, potentially up to 20,000 with 1 metre social distancing provisions. And the Ulster GA President Oliver Galligan acknowledged Croke Park also an option for them. Clonus could accommodate the biggest crowd with uncovered seating, but it looks as though Croke Park is probably going to see a lot of games between now and the end of the season. Elsewhere, we need to be playing in front of crowds. Warren's Munster chief Shane touched on this. This is Ian Flanagan, the Munster chief executive, that they are going to lose the vast majority of their income unless they can get back playing in front of crowds. And an interesting story on the right-hand side, Mick Wallace, Wexford, and the jersey with the Che Guevara logo, another new entry for the hashtag greatest league in the world. The FAI plan to consult with League of Ireland club Wexford after they unveiled a new shirt. The problem isn't the Che Guevara picture on the front of the jersey. It's the fact that the new jersey is sponsored by Mick Wallace's political grouping in the European Parliament, and that may well be in breach of FAI rules on jersey sponsorship.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with the latest in a long line of Irish sports people coming out to talk about racism. Antrim Ace urges GAA to lend voice to anti-racism, which is the headline here on a piece Larry Ryan has done with Lara Dehunzi, the Antrim footballer. We've also got Galway, Kerry and Wexford planning September club finals. This is a natural reaction. Several county boards preparing to finish up their championships in late September to give more time to their county teams. Galway, Kerry and Wexford are among a number of counties, writes John Fogarty this morning, looking at concluding competitions 2 weeks ahead of the club window elapsing on October 11th and 3 ahead of the inter-county resumption date of October 17th. So you're giving yourself at least 3 weeks to get ready for inter-county, which is probably the sweet spot. In fairness, we've got Shane Kingston coming up a little bit later on, and he says we probably need 6 or 7 weeks. That is assuming that the inter-county strength and conditioning person isn't coming in and actually helping you out and ensuring that you get up to the pitch of the game. If you were just being looked after your club, he says you need 6 or 7 weeks, which is interesting. But these counties look like they're going to be the first out in terms of trying to get more time for their counties. And then there's another line here from Munster CEO Ian Flanagan, which they've led with in the Examiner. Cronin incident could have happened to the man in the street. We take doping and issues associated with it incredibly serious, he said on the Crooked Feed, the official Munster Rugby podcast. as does all of Irish rugby. I also say I have a huge amount of sympathy for James in this. He has been incredibly unfortunate. So this is Munster CEO Eoin Flanagan on a Munster podcast, and Lana signs on to be part of Title Party. Adam Lallana will get the chance to finish a job off at Liverpool because he's agreed a short-term contract extension. Nice for Liverpool to allow him to be involved with it, and probably the right thing to do.
Well, they'll want him as well, I presume, over the next few weeks because they're going to be playing twice a week. So, like Adam Lallana has been getting a lot of game time over the last few months before football finished up. So, the one thing, actually, the bigger story is probably confirms that he's definitely going to leave at the end of the season, where there was a thought that maybe he may get another year, depending on how the transfer market was looking. The Irish Times, the sports section there, again on the left-hand side, they have the story that you touched on there of Eoin Flanagan, the Munster chief, says Cronin not to blame for doping mix-up, and they look forward to welcoming him back into the fold very soon. Chris Hughton is the main man in terms of pictures on the front of the Irish Times. Our organisations have an opportunity to be part of change. The Irish coach saying that recent protests can help football address race issues around the world. Racism doesn't go away overnight. It's over a period of time and education. A really good piece there with Chris Hughton that's well worth reading. And more on that then from Eamon Zaid. A lot of racist incidents in Ireland are just brushed under the carpet. And if there's one thing we've learned over the last few days, and not that we should have needed to learn about this, is that he's 100% right, and that there's consistently in sport as well as every other part of society racist incidents happening that quite simply nobody's talking about. And down the bottom of the Irish Times, this is a story we covered on OTBsports.com yesterday. O'Neill objects to development of pitch for youths. So this is a story that Dunfanaghy youths are looking to build a new facility near Hornhead House, which is a derelict property that Martin O'Neill owns, and Martin O'Neill has lodged a planning objection against this, which sparked quite a bit of debate. Some of the comments suggesting that it wouldn't be the first time he's tried to stop people playing football. But from a PR point of view, it's certainly backfired for Martin O'Neill because he's getting a huge amount of stick. Dunfanaghy have no facilities at the moment. They're looking to expand. They're looking to go and get themselves a decent setup, and this objection has put a real spanner in the works. Martin O'Neill, I'm sure, has a very different view and may well have very legitimate concerns as to why he doesn't feel that this is the right type of project for that area. And it'll be interesting to see if Martin O'Neill does comment, because from what I guess he probably thought was quite a very localised story, suddenly finds itself very much front and centre.
Not an amazing look at the moment, but he probably or may have legitimate concerns. It'll be interesting to see what he says. Back page of the London Times then is Southgate. I back Sterling on race bias. England boss says he wasn't qualified for first job he got. Interesting stuff in this. Great quotes from Gareth Southgate. Just a couple of bits of detail outside of the quotes. He and his squad had talks from anti-racism campaigner Troy Townsend, historian David Olusoga, and Sport England's Chris Grant, who said this week that British sport was undermined by an apartheid in plain sight. Raheem Sterling, as ever, leading the way on this. And I think if you look to your national manager and he is Gareth Southgate, it's great to be empowered by that and to know that Gareth Southgate will have your back on issues like this. Stoke call off United friendly. Meanwhile, as Shane has already mentioned, this is to do with the fact that Michael O'Neill obviously couldn't go, and their preparations for the resumption of the Premier League campaign, writes the newspaper, suffered a blow. It is understood that Solskjaer had arranged the friendly at their training base for 10 a.m, but a number of players from the Championship side turned up at the training ground in their own cars, but they left a short while after. So that's the issue with the Stoke squad. And tennis returns to Wuhan. Women's tennis chiefs are pushing ahead with plans for the tour to return later this year to the Chinese city of Wuhan, which was, of course, the original epicenter of the outbreak. So this is going to take place from October 19th to 25th.
Nothing sums up football being back more than that story of Manchester United's friendly being called off. The story surely was that Michael O'Neill, a high-profile manager, tested positive for COVID-19. Thankfully, he's asymptomatic. But in almost all these stories, you have to dig deep into it to figure out why.
It's not on
Manchester
the back page
United,
here, right?
The behemoth, why their friendly was called off. Manchester United in COVID scare, as compared to Michael O'Neill, who actually has been diagnosed with COVID.
Yeah, it's true. It's not. You would not know that Michael O'Neill has been diagnosed with COVID-19 if you didn't actually open the Times, despite the fact that it is a back page story.
The Irish Mail touches on quite a lot of the stories that are on all the back pages today. Munster back their anti-doping protocols again, dipping into that podcast interview with Ian Flanagan. Southgate calls for more action on racism. Gareth Southgate talking to the English media yesterday, and as you mentioned, very much backing his English players to take a stand. And also they have been talking with Shane Kingston, who I know is coming up very shortly, about the wraparound season and potential burnout threat to players. So we'll hear more, I'm sure, on that very shortly. They also have an exclusive interview with Toto Scalacci, the man who broke Irish hearts 30 years on from Italia 90. I wonder how his hair is looking these days.
Immaculate, I dare say.
I interviewed Toto a few years ago when he was brought to Dublin, and turns out he didn't have great English, but suddenly he had the most beautiful Antonio Conte-esque hair.
That's all you want from an interview, really, especially for radio. Back page of the Irish Daily Star. We'll wrap these up very quickly, Nathan. O'Neill's virus shock. Stoke boss rocked by positive COVID-19 test, and time is an issue, claims John Barnes. That's the Irish Daily Star.
Yeah, and looking down through some of the other papers then, the Telegraph in England, they go with Southgate, open door to black coaches. Taking a knee will be banned at the Olympics. I'm not sure if this is covered in too many of the newspapers, but one of the signs that these protests feel different to what has happened previously in terms of Black Lives Matter is that actually these terrible conglomerates and national governing bodies who generally will do whatever they can to stamp out any form of protest have been more accepting and allowing of players to take a protest. So whether it's football leagues, various different sports, saying actually the usual sanctions that would take place for any sort of, as they would deem a political protest, don't apply. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case at the Olympics. Athletes at next year's Olympics face a ban for taking a knee in solidarity with anti-racism movements, which even for the Olympic Committee is pretty shocking and shows just how far behind the curve they are. And if anything, I would imagine, is only going to invite further protests.
Yeah, it's a good point. Back page of the Mirror this morning is high-low, it's off to work I go. Shane Lowry there talking about the return to golf tomorrow, and Reds in virus scare. Old Trafford superstars are locked down. Like, if you stopped the sentence there, Nathan, you were like, right, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has coronavirus. Not the case. Old Trafford superstars are locked down. As Stoke boss O'Neill tests positive for COVID-19. Very much Michael O'Neill.
The impression you're getting is that somebody has arrived straight off a plane from Wuhan with a box full of bats and is wandering around Carrington. Not that actually Michael O'Neill has been diagnosed with COVID-19. He has tested positive. And again, thankfully, he doesn't have any symptoms, but you would have thought that that's the story here. Poor old Manchester United. Like, that will be the next one. United's pre-season plans in disarray.
That will be the next one. I wouldn't be surprised if it already exists inside some of the papers this morning. Let's just tell you finally this morning, in terms of the sports pages and in terms of content, if you want to bring you, the OTB Sports app is now live. You can get it in the App Store or in the Google Play Store. All your breaking news there and all the stories from across the OTB podcast network, our videos, and one-stop shop basically for everything off the ball. You can get OTB AM there this morning. You can get it every morning, and you can watch or listen as a radio show while you go about your morning. So that is the OTB Sports app, as I say, in the Google Play Store and in the App Store right now. Graham Hunter, good morning.
Good morning. Am I on the app? Is this my app debut?
It certainly is. It feels like a long time, Graham. How's life?
Life is utterly extraordinary. It's to be me. I'm very funny and nobody amuses me more than I do. A little bit golf recently, so I know you want to talk about more serious matters, but you asked me how I was and I thought I'd tell you.
How is Spain prepared for the return of La Liga? How do people feel about football coming back? Is it this great thing that they've been looking for quite some time? Or is there still a bit of unease about football coming back?
Well, you've asked a huge question, and I can't speak for everybody. And there's a real massive variety of views. And I find it interesting that just like in England, for example, where we've seen Troy Deeney return to training and Kante return to field training at Chelsea. One example is Suso, who was a talented wing at Liverpool and AC Milan. He's now a really key player for Sevilla, one that Lopetegui loves. And of course, we begin in La Liga. There's a game tonight in the lower division But we begin with La Liga on Thursday evening with Seville Derby. And Suso is a really important factor for Lopetegui. And he said a few weeks ago, my wife is due to give birth. I'm not really happy about the idea about taking a risk about going back. Normally, I'd feel differently, but if I took this virus, an infection back to my house at a time when we were about to have another child, I'd never forgive myself. Yeah, he's not only been training full out, he's cleared from a slight knee problem. Looks like he'll start on Thursday night. There's a mini trajectory that's happened. How everybody feels about it is too hard a question, but if I take into account the media people I've spoken to, if I take into account the people who listen, the general public phoning in to radio stations, if I take into account what the majority of the people in the football industry have been saying, not only is there a natural embracing of not only a return to normality, but something that's a central part of the national culture here. Football is lived, as we've explained over many years, differently from in Ireland and the UK, but it's still something that marks out the pulse of this nation. It's a really important cultural phenomenon, not just a sporting phenomenon. And one of the things that I'd go to just to wrap up and answer to your question would be that La Liga has come out of this so far tremendously well. At a time when I know that there's still a huge debate in the UK about, where playoffs happen, where games happen, should there be neutral grounds or not, La Liga has set its course out many weeks ago and worked to achieve its goals. So, for example, instead of the clubs, because in Spain, different regions are in different stages of fighting back the virus and have different permissions. So at the moment, La Liga has taken over as a travel agency. So it will be shifting all the clubs around in terms of transport, in terms of accommodation. They'll try and make sure that as few teams as possible need to stay overnight in the venues that they're playing in. But you have to take into account that this will be, right now is not the latest that Spain has played professional football, because when I was beginning my football journalism career, Spain would regularly play into late June. The playoffs for the second division to come up go into June too. But they'll be playing into July. So temperature is a really important factor. They'll be playing in brutal heat in some parts of the country, although we're going through 15 weeks of the worst weather I've experienced in 20 years living here. However, it means a lot of matches will kick off late at night. It means a lot of teams will need to stay overnight, can't get home. Hotels aren't always open. La Liga has been pacting with specific hotels. They must open from a situation where they were furloughed or closed. They've been got back into working order, and each team that plays at a specific venue that needs to stay overnight, each team will stay at the same hotel, with the same staff, same precautions. I would argue that, in life, particularly in a situation that we've no real precedent for in the Western world, La Liga has put itself in a position where, yeah, sure, things could go wrong. Things like you just mentioned about, senior coach Michael O'Neill being diagnosed with the virus at a time when his side is playing a friendly at Carrington against Manchester United. There will be, La Liga in Spain will probably stub its toe on various different problems in the weeks to come. In terms of preparation, in terms of seriousness, in terms of modern thinking, and in terms of trying to make the blanket of security for everybody who's going to be involved in giving us professional from tonight onwards, I think La Liga has done an admirable job, and I think it's been a baptism of fire for the modern La Liga, given that we live in a country where the central organisation lagged far behind the Premier League for many years. This has been a test of fire, one which we'd all like to have avoided. But right now, I'm genuinely, honestly, and I would say differently if I felt differently, pretty impressed with the central governing body here.
Graham, when you look at English football and how that it feels has been very much front and centre in how Britain has been dealing with this crisis, from it felt as though they didn't take COVID-19 seriously till Mikel Arteta was diagnosed and suddenly football was cancelled and suddenly everybody realises this is a serious threat. Within a week it had turned into Matt Hancock calling out footballers for not taking pay cuts, and a month later we need football back to lift the mood of the nation. And now we're in the stage where it's back, and you talk about La Liga stubbing its toe, that if the Premier League stubs its toe at all, there'll be a pile on footballers, their disconnect. and maybe that sums up a lot between the ruling class in England and their attitude still towards football. Have any of those similar conversations been happening in Spain during this? Have there been similar questions asked about how much players are earning, how they're reacting to this crisis in comparison to the average man on the street?
Geez, Nathan, I thought Eoin asked me a difficult question. You know, as much criticism as there's been from within Spain about the governmental stance and the government stance vis-a-vis sport, Spain is not governed by the same class of half-wit that the UK is. You know, bumbling, self-interested half-wittery is something that Britain only takes a silver medal compared to America's gold, in my opinion. What's happened here is, again, it's a jigsaw of answers, because there's no way that this country believes that its handling of how the spread of the virus and the implementations of measures against it have been perfect, but they have been noticeably more serious, more strict, and quicker than in the UK. Now, where I would give you a constructive answer is that the sports department of the government recognised very early that getting football back would be useful, popular, commercially important to a number of clubs. And the female head of the sports department in the government very early got the FA and the league together, smashed their heads together, because two different men who run it do not like each other, do not get on, and take every opportunity to try and trip each other up. There has been, since this banging of heads meeting, a clarity, a unity, a dynamism of moving forward with noticeably no bickering, no bitching. And that has meant that football has been able to take the government as, what would you call it, a litmus test, a temperature test for the well-being of the preparation. So when I picked on Suso, but there were a number of footballers who said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is too soon. I'm not sure if I feel safe. And what the football union here, the AFE, was able to say was, all right, look, we're worried about infection. We're worried about general protection. We are worried about concertinaing so many fixtures in such a short space of time. We will not play more than once every 3 days. And football was able to relay all these problems back to say, okay, we won't, the governing body of football won't order clubs and players to do X and Y until the government's Department of Health and Department of Sport give a nationwide okay that things are safe and will project ahead. So over the last, let's call it 7 or 8 weeks, when there's been a really clear momentum towards starting to play at or around June 11, 12, we've had the stages charted out for us. And footballers have been able to see, okay, that's an aim, but now the government, scientists or elected government ministers who are accountable to the public have been able to say, yeah, tick that box. So rather than I'll say what I think you were saying, the expedient use of football as a commodity by the British government, that has never, ever, there's not been a trace of that here. This has been run really centrally by, effectively by La Liga and its head Javier Tebas. But for once in Spain, and it'll last probably about 24 hours now that we're all going to be starting bickering about football again, there has been a unity of purpose, and it's really unusual in Spain.
Right, that's very interesting. Let's talk about the actual football, because Bundesliga and the title race was done within a fortnight. There is no title race to speak of in the Premier League. In the Liga, we've got one hell of a run in.
I think that's right in every sense. There isn't a single team at the bottom that is absolutely guaranteed to go down. I feel for poor old Liga, because they've got several players out of contract who'll be, rather than the case of the striker at Charlton, probably saying, well, you know, as soon as this league's out of the way, I'm getting a nice money move. And so I worry a little bit about Liga. But other than that, at the bottom, there are several clubs that can still drop in or save themselves. In terms of the race for Europe, it's absolutely fabulous, because you've got, at the moment, Real Sociedad top four, with Atleti saying we can't afford not to be in the top four because our debt position is such that we have to be in the Champions League next season. You've got Getafe, who play a style of pickpocket football whereby like they're as close to you on the pitch as somebody who's trying to nick the wallet or your phone would be. And that means intense running, intense pressing, intense work, which they're not going to be immediately able to do. They're bubbling at around Europa League and Champions League places. I think they've been prejudiced against by this gap caused by COVID. So Getafe, who looked like the fairy tale story to get in the top four, now might not. And then right at the top of the league, which is what you were alluding to, you've got a 2-point gap for Barcelona, who, in my opinion, this has been their worst season since Frank Rijkaard left, in terms of consistency, in terms of not fitness, because they're a diligent squad, but intensity, physical sporting intensity. They've been saved by grit, the real hard-nosed grit of Piqué and Stegen, and the genius of Messi, although Messi has not been playing at his best since about the Ballon d'Or awards. Prior to that, it was pretty sexy stuff. And you've got Real Madrid, who, if they could score enough goals to match their possession, if they could win at home more regularly, what a strange thing to say about Real Madrid, they would be top instead of 2 points behind. The thing that they've got up their sleeve, lads, is that the two Clásicos were a draw and then a win for Madrid at home. If Barcelona and Madrid finish equal on points, Madrid will automatically win the title. So the head-to-head rule. And at the moment, you would say that there are massive imponderables. Does it make it easier for teams to come to Camp Nou with no fans there and say, yeah, we'll play you one-on-one? I don't think it necessarily does. Barca's fans don't intimidate teams. Barca will use the width of the pitch well. I think Barcelona feel okay about that. Real Madrid are putting the Bernabeu under major renovation work, so they're going to be playing at their training ground, at the Alfredo Di Stefano. There'll still be no fans, but it'll be a tiny little training ground stadium. Does that benefit them or not? There's in a cup. Okay, we start this weekend. We start on Thursday night with Sevilla at home to Betis. One of the saddest sights we'll see in Spain, I think, because of the stripping away of fans, is that crazy, passionate, frying pan hot derby. Without fans will be sad but necessary. But by the weekend, it's Real Madrid playing at home to Eibar, Barcelona at Mallorca. After which, there's a little conglomeration of games where Real Madrid need to play Real Sociedad and Valencia. Barcelona have to play Sevilla and Athletic. And that's the amen corner of games where this title will turn. And you're right, it's tight. It's as personal as usual between Madrid and Football Club Barcelona. At this distance, it's really hard to call. The bookies will tell you Barca. I'm going to suggest to you Real Madrid. But come the end of the season, who the hell knows?
Why are you leaning on the side of the fence for Real Madrid at this point? Is this as much to do with Barcelona as it is to do with Real Madrid?
I think that Real Madrid have been the better side across the season. I think that they began to look a little bit jaded. They have a very talented physical trainer called Gregory Dupont, who I think got them in shape pretty quickly. But I think they had physical debt, which was affecting their clarity of final pass and finishing. Since I think during the gap, they will have benefited more than Football Club Barcelona. That is augmented by the fact that even though Marco Asensio has been out for a very long time, he's back. He will add both goals and goal assists. Still more importantly, the superb partnership which was blossoming between Eden Hazard and Benzema can be resumed. Equally, Eden Hazard isn't going to hit the ground running looking like the Chelsea legend that he became, but he's back. He was out. Those two striker alternatives or forward alternatives that would give cutting edge to Real Madrid, I believe, helped very much indeed. Real Madrid were tripping up at Bernabeu. They were drawing and losing matches that they should have won. I think it will do them no harm whatsoever to be playing at the training ground, taking the games away from an empty Bernabeu, to be playing in an area where they work every day. I think that's a minor advantage, but I think it's a plus. I think that the Amen corner sorts it out. Real Madrid's fixtures, in my mind, are a smidge easier, but they have to beat Valencia and Real Sociedad in order to make sure that the pressure's on Barcelona, after which I think they have the nicer run-in. And it's against the odds slightly because it's a 2-point gap, because Barcelona have Messi and Suarez reunited, which is absolutely vital. It looked like Suarez was going to miss the whole of the season that remained now because of this mad drop-off of games that we've had. He's back. So it's an instinct. I think Real Madrid, I honestly think Real Madrid are also stronger, younger, athletically better side. I think when you play so many games in a short space of time with 5 substitutes allowed, I think Real Madrid's squad, their athletic propensity, and the fact that they're going to be, I think they're a better cutting edge up front now than they did. I think that edges it for them.
It is interesting when we touched on this earlier in the week in the Premier League, and players returning who we thought would miss the rest of the season. So whether it's a Suarez, or I know Eden Hazard was on the verge of returning, or Marcos Asensio, sort of the forgotten man at this stage of Real Madrid after missing the entire season. I've been reading a few things on Hazard, and a lot of journalists have had a lot of time to dive deep into what's going on over the last few months and what's gone wrong for Eden Hazard, and he's not picking up the ball in the same dangerous positions as he was at Chelsea. 10 times less per game he's picking it up in the final third on the left-hand side. This break, this getting a good spell on the training ground, does it give Zidane an opportunity to figure out how to get the ball to Hazard in those positions, or is there something deeper going on that we still can't expect him back to where he was at Chelsea for the remainder of this season?
Nathan, there's a mixed picture again. I'm sorry to be moderate and sitting on the fence a little bit here, and I'm sorry to have to kick out against some of my journalistic colleagues here in Spain. But there was quite a lot of tosh spoken. I've seen the statistical analysis you're talking about, which suggested that Chelsea, he was given liberty to float around, not a number 10 role, but between the midfield and the strikers, if he wanted to come in off the left. And at Real Madrid, he's been more pegged towards the left side. So if you want to build a picture that's a proper answer to you, he himself said that he had crisps and beer to an extent over the summer when he was arriving at Real Madrid, that he was carrying 5-6 kilos extra. That was pretty stupid. So he immediately gets injured and misses a chunk of time. He's not in peak condition in the initial weeks of his return from that injury. Then when he hits the ground running, okay, he wasn't at Chelsea level, but he was in a new team which was still rebuilding under Zidane with others around him, not necessarily on massive form. And he stood out. He genuinely stood out as being a player that made a difference to those around him, that stretched defences wide and long, that went past people. His form was very good. And I was at the game where he became, where he was injured badly, when Munia stepped on his ankle and caused it. I think it was accidental, but there was no foul for it. It was crazy. He played on a little bit, came back in the league game, broke down again. The ankle needed rebuilding. Yes, he played positionally differently than at Chelsea, but in his first season, given the amount of injury absences he had, if you trained a close eye on the qualities he brought and the partnerships that he brought, it was coming. It was coming to a degree that was, I think, directly comparable. Why would we compare Hazard's last 2 seasons at Chelsea, when he was exceptional, maybe one of the top 5 players in the world, to his debut season, a little bit overweight and injury-ridden at Real Madrid? It's better to compare his start at Chelsea, I would say, and it was comparable. He was in good nick. He looked as if he was coming to terms with the different, not the size of the club, I don't mean to Chelsea, but there's a level of demand on you daily, a level of intensity that doesn't necessarily sit with Hazard. And you can compare it to Schneider recently, who, although he was talking through a balloon when he said, I could have been as good as Messi and Ronaldo, there's no chance. He said, I kind of liked a glass of wine here and there. I didn't really want to push to be in that top echelon. I was happy with what I did. Schneider and Hazard share a certain personality trait, which is like, I love to play football. I love to enjoy myself. I love a big salary. I love to win trophies. But to be up there living a Spartan life, to be number 1 in the world, it doesn't appeal to him. And that cost him a little bit in season number 1. The idea that Hazard, when fit, wasn't being a big influence on that Real Madrid team wasn't, in my opinion, and he stayed fit, about to push them towards the title and push them to be better competitors against Manchester City. I think that idea is ill-founded.
One final point, Graham, and it's an off-the-pitch question when it comes to Barcelona. We had begun this year speaking about what is going on, what is the relationship between Messi and Abidal, and how is this going to develop. As you say, it hasn't been an amazing season for Messi and the team as a whole. What has happened over the last 3 months on that front?
Oh, man. Well, look, okay, I think we also touched on your show on that Barcelona reached out for state help financially. It was imperative that they negotiated a breakdown of salary reductions with the players. And the players not only said we'll take a 70% cut until the return of football, we'll also give an extra couple of percentage voluntarily from our salaries to make sure that the staff who might otherwise be furloughed with a salary reduction keep their full salary. I like that. That was a voluntary thing from Barcelona's players. The temperature is a little bit different now because they should be, now that football is returning, they should be being paid the full whack. And I don't want this to be, you wouldn't tolerate a world's smallest violin and say, like, it's possible that when Messi and Suarez nick down the supermarket, they won't be able to buy as many bottles of Fanta and, Skips Crisps as normal. That ain't the case. But, honour, honesty, transparency, these things are important within football. They're important in the relationship between a club and their squad. And Bartomeu, the president, for whom I have very little regard as a football man, he's asked them to take a sustained wage cut because the club has suffered very serious losses. Their budgeting time is coming up because of the way the calendar sets the end of June as the budgeting time. And there is a strange situation when, everybody who advocates that having a presidential system at a club where the fans can vote for, and over the years we've had that discussion about, foreign owners or a chairman we don't like, or fan ownership. Fan ownership lets a board. That's one of the rules are that if you make certain degree of losses, the board themselves need to pay for those losses, percentages of those losses. So at the moment, each of Bartomeu's board is standing. If the situation were to be, if the final accounting for this fiscal year were today, each of them would be out of pocket a six-figure sum themselves. Now they're trying to pass that problem onto the players' salaries. That's a hugely difficult proposition. The players are like, all right, world pandemic, and you need a 70% cut? Yeah, we're up for it. You haven't budgeted very well. You spent ridiculous money on signings that haven't worked. You've allowed us to negotiate brutal wage rises, and now you want to take our money away to pay for your ineptitude. That's not a good situation. It's not a happy feeling between them. So, and one more point would be they keep trying to flog Ivan Rakitic, who keeps saying, I've got a big contract. I'm happy. I'm not going. So is it a happy camp? In short, no, it bloody isn't. No, not even close.
It sounds like something that we could spend a lot more time on, Graham. We also wanted to get your thoughts on the 2010 World Cup, but I guess we're going to have to do it some other time. We are out of time, unfortunately. It's tomorrow, 10 years ago, the tournament would have started, so we've got a full month, basically, to go back and revisit it. I know you're doing it.
Come back to me. Yeah. Come back to me every single day of that month. I've got stories you wouldn't believe.
It's a great...
I was ready to just set you off for half an hour on the beauty of Xavi Alonso, but that'll have to wait as well. We'll do that over the next month as well.
Well, it's a great tease to our next slot.
You can count me in, baby.
Enjoy the football, Graham, and hopefully it all goes well. Chat to you soon.
Magic.
Graham Hunter there on the line. It is 8:57 on this Wednesday morning. We're going to be back in a moment, and our Premier League best case, worst case is next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB's Mount Rushmore. 32 counties. One county representative choosing their sporting Mount Rushmore.
So essentially your Rushmore is Darren Randolph, Katie Taylor, Lord Whitmore and me. That's it. Who else did you have in mind?
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off The Ball.
Tom, why are we even debating this? He won Wimbledon twice.
And catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM. Live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
Cartilage and bone health are important for keeping the spring in your step. Joint Ace from the nutritional experts at Vitabiotics is uniquely formulated with glucosamine, vitamin C and D and copper to help maintain healthy bones, cartilage and connective tissues. Ideal for maintaining an active lifestyle. Keep a spring in your step with Joint Ace in your local pharmacy, in store and online.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back. Time for best case, worst case. We're going through every single Premier League club before the resumption of football in England. Today we are looking at Crystal Palace, Everton and Leicester. Nathan, we'll start with Crystal Palace. Let's get straight into this. Mid-table, definition of mid-table. They're 11th, 39 points, level on points with Burnley, who are in 10th, who we spoke about yesterday. The best case and the worst case are fairly mild propositions here, but let's start with the best case scenario for Crystal Palace.
Similar to Burnley, you want to stay where you are. They don't have a squad to contest in the Europa League if they were to qualify, and do enough to keep Wilfried Zaha. They kept him last summer, hasn't got near the heights of a season ago. He's only scored 3 goals so far, but it's still the only little bit of X factor they have in that team. You would worry about where they would go if he were to leave. Okay, Jordan Ayew's come in this season and done well, but he's not at that level. They were probably the most disappointed team to see the season finish up. They'd won 3 matches in a row, so they'd gone from in a position where they'd been dragged right back in to relegation scrap. They'd only won one of their previous 11, 12 matches, but they now find themselves in a rather comfortable position. And again, one of those teams, it'll be interesting to see how they approach the end of the season. I know there's huge money at stake for every position you rise up the table, but a manager of Roy Hodgson's experience, like, do you use this time as a bit of a trial run for next season? Do you experiment a little bit? Do you give some of the younger players a chance when there's not a huge amount at stake? Because they've had time to consider what's going to happen. But trying to score goals and maybe trying to come up with a system where they'll score more goals, it should be the main focus, because I think only Newcastle and Norwich have scored less than them this season. And I'd imagine you look at the players they have in an attacking sense, whether it is Townsend, Ayew, Benteke, Zaha, I'd imagine their wage bill for attacking players is off the charts, and they're not getting a huge return for it.
That could spell trouble down the line as well, but the worst case is not that they're going to get relegated, I dare say. I'd say it's a very, very small chance that'll happen. They're on 39 points, and Bournemouth in 18th, they're on 27 points. But we're going to move on. 2 points worse off than Crystal Palace are Everton in 12th place on 37 points. The season, as it is really in terms of the best case scenario, is a little bit of a write-off for these mid-table clubs at the moment. So beyond that, what is the best case scenario for Everton?
Well, the best case scenario for Everton is very simple. That Liverpool don't win the title against Everton on Sunday week. Simple as that. If Manchester City go and beat Arsenal on the opening night of the return, it's not going to be possible anyways, but that would be a disaster, an absolute disaster. While the Liverpool supporters may not get a chance to celebrate it right now, if they could win the title against Everton, potentially at Goodison Park, though I know there's a meeting this morning where it may take place at St Mary's at the Southampton ground, that game, but that's got to be their aim right now. It's sort of stuttered a lot over the last few weeks. Carlo Ancelotti came in initially, managed to start producing some decent runs, but 1 win in 10 before football split up. Our last game on Off the Ball was at Stamford Bridge. Their 4-0 defeat against Chelsea. And my preview, as always, was pretty shocking for that, because when you looked at the two teams, I touched on it yesterday, Chelsea were missing their entire first-choice midfield. Everton were more or less at full strength, and they were dominated by a really young, energetic Chelsea side. And a lot of the same problems are still there. They've huge issues in the middle of midfield. Andre Gomez only returning. Is he at the level where he can run a game? Gylfi Sigurdsson, so flaky. They've so many attacking players who you just can't trust, with the exception, I think, of Richarlison, who I would have as arguably the best player outside the top 6 and somebody they may struggle to hold on to if teams are looking around during the summer. Now, they spent a lot of money, so they'd be looking for a lot of money for him. But Richarlison consistently delivers, has scored a lot of goals. Calvert-Lewin has obviously stepped up to another level, but it's the players in the wings, whether it's Bernard, Walcott, Iwobi, Sigurdsson. You've no idea. You've no idea if they're going to turn up and perform on the day. So they're safe, but Everton are a team, again, looking at their wage bill, who should be a top-table side. And the worry and the frustration is that, having initially come in, and it was a disaster under Marco Silva and was only getting worse, that they seem to be back to the same old failings. And how many times we heard Seamus Coleman in post-match interviews bemoaning the lack of consistency, the lack of fight, the frustration that is there.
How much is
and
he going to play,
seems
Nathan?
to be there again.
How much is Coleman going to play?
Well, he wasn't playing just before we wrapped up. I know he had an injury for that game against Chelsea, but the couple of matches before that he hadn't started. He'd been in and out. It's either himself or Djibril Sidibe. Sidibe's on loan. You assume they will extend the loan past the 30th of June. They have an option to buy him for 13 million from Monaco. That may well decide how much he plays over the next couple of seasons. Coleman's it's chalk and cheese in terms of defending and defensive ability. Coleman is a far, far better defender than Sidibe. He's an absolute liability, but in an attacking sense, Coleman probably doesn't have the vibrancy that he once had bombing forward, and Sidibe most certainly does. They did try them on the same side for a while, and it was okay, but I'm not sure what will have happened during the break, whether or not Carlo Ancelotti is going to keep trying with real attacking full backs on both sides with Luca Dean on the other, or whether he thinks, actually, you know what, I need to get to grips with this over the last 9-10 games of the season, and I need the guy who I can trust will put in a really good performance day in, day out. Coleman, I keep saying this, Coleman's had very few off days.
Yeah.
It is that sense. He's been there so long, something bright, new and shiny comes in, and we prefer that. But like Sidibe, I think teams time and time again will target him.
Finally then, Leicester City, run through the best case scenario here and the worst case scenario for us.
Best case scenario for Leicester is they stay where they are and they finish inside the Champions League positions. It'd be a massive achievement for Brendan Rodgers, and one they would thoroughly deserve. They play scintillating football and they have the quality. You look through that side from top to bottom, there's still a core there of players who won the Premier League. Schmeichel is one of the best keepers in the Premier League. Johnny Evans and Sayunshu, again, as a centre-half partnership, are right up there. And so much brilliant young attacking talent in midfield from Tielemans, Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, all feeding in to Jamie Vardy. They're a brilliant, brilliant team to watch. And I really do hope they see it out. They obviously had some difficulties before the break. They'd only won 1 of 5. They'd lost to Manchester City. They'd drawn with Wolves and Chelsea, the teams around them. They've got Watford, Brighton, Chelsea, Everton first up. If they can win those games against Watford and Brighton and get a bit of momentum back, you would expect they should have enough. And we still don't know whether it's top 4 or top 5, but there's no question they've been one of the top 3 teams in the Premier League. And maybe best case scenario is that Manchester City take their eye off the ball slightly, start thinking about Europe as the season wears on, and they can push themselves up and finish in second, which would be an unbelievable achievement for Leicester. I think third, if they finish third, if they stay where they are, they'll be very happy with that. Worst case scenario is that it sort of crumbles and they somehow end up missing out.
Yeah.
And then where does that go in the summer? Because even though they've won the Premier League within the last 5 years, all their best players are consistently linked with a move away. And like James Maddison, probably the most enjoyable player to watch outside of Liverpool and Manchester City. Brilliant personality as well. Seems to have an awful lot to say for himself. You could see him going on and moving and being targeted by some of those bigger clubs. And even Johnny Evans has been linked with moves away again. Sayunshu consistently tipped with a move to one of the, again, so-called bigger clubs. But if they qualify for the Champions League, you would expect that they will just keep hold of everybody.
It seemed like they were in a nice situation before the break where Sayunshu started to show a bit of vulnerability at centre-back. And it was like, if they can just kind of slide in under the radar nicely into the end of the season, qualify for the Champions League, everybody thinks the likes of Sayunshu is actually overrated, then they might get into the Champions League next season. And I don't know, he's hustled us all. Like Ben Chilwell, for example, is a name who comes up every single morning in the papers. Every single line of their team is naturally linked with everybody else. They're in third place. If the Manchester City ban is upheld, it's great news for them. They've got a 10-point cushion on Wolves in 6th place. And as you say, if they get those first 2 wins, then really it's not going to happen for Leicester if you've got any hope to the worst-case scenario materialising, which is them not qualifying for the Champions League next season. But that is
they have money. They have money,
yeah,
and they can go and spend it. But they've also shown, even after they won the league, selling Kante, selling Mahrez, that when the big offers come in, they'd be foolish not to take them.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if it's keep most, but maybe sell 1 or 2.
For sure, that's probably the way to go. That is best case, worst case scenario for today. Tomorrow it is Liverpool, Manchester City and Manchester United. That is the thing about doing these things in alphabetical order. You get one heavy hitter in the middle and you're going to miss it, Nathan, unfortunately. Stephen Doyle will be with us to run the rule over those 3 teams. Just to tell you as well this morning that this Friday at midday we'll have another edition of Know Your Football, where you'll have the chance to win the rollover prize of $2,000. 15 football related questions, and all you have to do is answer all 15 correctly to win. Keep an eye on our social channels throughout the week to find out how to register to play. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Up next, Cork's Shane Kingston and R&B artist Erica Cody are on the way.
You can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore, live every weekday at 7:30 a.m. on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
Okay, so UCC's Shane Kingston has today received his Electric Ireland GAA Higher Education Rising Star Hurling Player of the Year trophy. Kingston, who was also a member of the 2019 Electric Ireland GAA Higher Education Rising Star Team of the Year, continued his terrific form in the competition this year. The Cork forward was a consistent threat to opposition teams and scored 4 points in the final to help UCC retain the Electric Ireland Fitzgibbon Cup and claim his Fitzgibbon Cup medal. Delighted to say that Shane Kingston is on the line with us now. Shane, how are you getting on?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good now. How are you?
All good. Hearing those accolades being listed off, it must feel like an eternity since you played hurling.
Yeah, I know. The Fitzgibbon now seems like a long time ago, even though it was this year. So, yeah. At least now we have a bit of positive news, and thankfully we have something to look forward to.
How has life treated you for somebody who associates themselves with hurling so closely, for sports people not having their organised games? It must have been tough at times over the last 3 months.
Yeah, it was weird, right? You kind of go from training about 4 or 5 nights a week to just nothing all of a sudden. Usually, if you get a break, it's only for a week or two max, and you're using that time to allow the body to recover and repair itself. Whereas now it was just it was a sudden just 3 months of nothing. But I suppose I'd say the majority of people took their break for a week or two and then kind of got back on top of things. Everybody was doing, I assume anyways, doing their own hurling, their own running, gym work, and the majority of people won't let themselves fall away.
Is it only a week or two that you take? Is that all it is, and then you keep yourself fairly fit after that?
Well, I suppose initially it was kind of the start of March, really, when this kind of kicked off. I don't think anyone thought it would go as far as it did. So at the start for me, I was kind of training away myself, keeping on top of things, thinking we'd be back playing already. But then as things progressed, I kind of realised it'd be a bit longer. So I took a bit of downtime then, and it was kind of around my college exams as well. So I just put the head down for them, really. But now the last few weeks there, now I'm kind of getting back on top of things. As I said, just doing your own running and hurling and gym work and stuff.
And who's assigning that? I presume it's your strength and conditioning trainer with the Cork team who's assigning that, or how does it work?
Yeah, they just be same as everyone, really. Just send out stuff to do, and I suppose it's up to yourself, really, if you want to do it. I kind of be doing my own stuff then as well in the gym and the hurling. But yeah, they've assigned stuff for us to do. So
I'm not sure if you've looked at the GA return to play plan much over the last couple of days, but it's going to be a fairly condensed season. You'll have earned your break. I think it's fair to say come the end of this season, it'll be club straight into county, basically. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm delighted about it, because I suppose up until a few weeks ago, I was kind of starting to lose faith in the whole thing. I just thought it was the year would kind of be written off. But then as kind of things progressed and you saw other countries bringing back their sports, and then when the GA announced that last week, I was delighted, probably the same as everyone, really, to go from thinking there'd be nothing then to realising you have both club and county. It was brilliant. And I suppose as well, it's nice for a change that you're having a nice run-in with the club. Usually it'd only be probably 10 days or 2 weeks of club training and you're into games, whereas now we can, I suppose, in the next few weeks kind of get back training. It's nice for county players to get back to the club for that excess time, and it's nice for the club players to kind of have a good go at trying to win something now.
That's a really good point, because it's always right up on the back of your inter-county season. You may have got out and, I don't know, blown off the cobwebs after losing your last championship game, and then suddenly you're in with the club the next week, and you may not be able to approach it in the best headspace, sometimes not in the best physical space as well. So probably for the first time in your senior career, although it hasn't been a long senior career so far, you're probably going to be approaching your club season in the best shape you've ever been.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I suppose the last 3 months your body's been recovering and repairing, so I kind of took the break now, so I'm looking forward now to something. So it's nice that, as I said, you get a good stab off the club. It's only when you move up to senior you realise how much time is taken from the club, whereas now you can kind of give back, I suppose.
Do you miss playing for your club? I know you would have done anyway, but as an inter-county player, you know yourself, you get less time to put into it.
Yeah, I suppose absolutely. They're the majority of people you play with your club are the people you kind of grew up with. Thankfully with Douglas, I've had a lot of success underage. I've kind of won every medal from 14 up as far as 21. So it's nice. But I suppose when you go to senior, then it's people kind of, you're mixing in with a different bunch of players, but you know, it's still the same kind of bond and it's the same community really. Like, so as I said, it's nice going back playing for the club. Like,
just in terms of the proximity between the club season into the intercounty season, it's going to be an interesting dynamic. I'd actually be interested, how much time do you need to transition? Do you need any time at all to transition into the intercounty game? Could you go with, say, a fortnight in between the two different seasons?
I suppose ideally you wouldn't. Like, you need your probably, I suppose, 6 to 8 weeks really of trying to get that extra level of fitness in hurling. But I suppose given the situation and I suppose the fact that we thought we'd have nothing, you kind of take what you're given. Obviously 2 weeks, the proposal of 2 weeks isn't ideal, but at the end of the day, we're lucky enough to be having something, so it's not too bad. Like.
And what's the difference, Shane? Is it fitness? Is that the difference? Is that when you're talking about the 6 to 8 weeks? What's the work you're doing to bring you up to an intercounty pitch?
I suppose initially, yeah, fitness, because I suppose you wouldn't be comparing Crow Park to the same size as, I don't know, your average club pitch, like.
Sure.
Definitely a lot bigger, or even Parky Queeve. I suppose the hurling's that bit quicker as well, like, but you know, the club championship in Cork is of a fairly high standard, so it won't be too far off it, provided we progress.
It could almost be a situation as well where perhaps your strength and conditioning coach with the county team has you for one night a week, even throughout your club season, and that means you're primed and raring to go, obviously, for your club games. But come the end of it, you'll have done a lot of the hard work for the intercounty season. There could actually be a happy marriage here somewhere.
Yeah, I suppose that's up to the GA really. Like, for the moment, anyway, it's club only.
Yeah,
we'll have to see. Like, I suppose, as I said, it's up to fellas to kind of tip away themselves. Like, maybe if the club training is obviously fairly intense, you're fine. Like, but you know, different grades as well. Like, if people are playing intermediate or senior or junior, kind of depends on that as well. For me, with Douglas anyway, seniors, it's fairly high standard, like, so it won't be too bad, like, it won't be far off it.
Do you have any concern at all about Cork being a dual county and therefore having a little bit of an extra window in which to fill their games? Like, I see Kilkenny earlier on released their fixtures. They were doing a condensed club championship for their hurling championship, and of course none of them are dual players really, whereas some of the Cork lads might well be, and it's just a bit longer and it might be a bit trickier on your front.
Well, yeah, it's not the ideal scenario, like, but I suppose with the Cork Championship, given there's so many teams, and if you're playing dual, I think you could be out every week really between hurling and football. Yeah, look, I suppose it's not ideal, but like, I suppose it's match fitness as well, because that'll be the big thing. I'd say match fitness is a big issue, like, so probably the more games you could say, the better, provided you stay injury free, which is probably a big concern.
A lot of people we've spoken to, Shane, over the last few weeks have said that they've spent their quarantine or their lockdown actually looking back at old tape or kind of putting down goals or thinking a lot about their own sporting career and crystallising things for themselves. Is that something you've done at all?
Not really, to be honest. I wouldn't be a man for looking back on too many games. I suppose I just, for my own personal perspective, I just kind of just do my own training. What I feel I need to work on. You know, this is probably every club intercounty player would say this is a nice opportunity to work on things that I suppose you couldn't work on before. Like, when are you ever going to get a 3-month window to work on something during the summer? Like, but that's what I've been doing anyway. Like.
And can I ask, is that your father's house that you're sitting in at the moment?
Yeah.
So what's it been like quarantining with the Cork manager for 3 months?
It's grand. Not too bad, to be fair. Like, I'm trying away myself anyway, so he knows I'm doing it. I suppose he's probably hoping everybody else is training away as well. What you can do when you're kind of restricted, so everyone's in the same boat, really.
Because when you were saying earlier that there were training regimes being handed down from management, I presume your father was part of coming up with those plans, and I assume that there's no way you're getting away with missing a day or two here or there.
You kind of stay away from me a bit, like that to the other management people. Probably best.
Do you like having your father as a manager?
Yeah, it's grand. Like, it's not different really, to be honest. The only difference is really when I go home, he's still there. Like, but you know, I had it growing up as well with the club when I was younger. I'm sure I'm used to it from 2016 and 17. So it's not much different really, to be honest.
Was the dynamic different then when he wasn't manager last year or in 2018?
I don't think so really. Like, you know, every time you go out, you're trying to get the best out of yourself and play the best you can, and regardless of who the manager is. Like, like you're going out, whether it's club or county, you're going out representing the people that are there to support you. So it doesn't really matter who's on the line shouting at you. Like, not that you can hear him anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And do you talk much about the game when you're not in training? Is it very much kept to when you're in training that you only communicate about hurling then, or do you have conversations when you're around the house at home?
Sometimes, like not too much. Like, he's obsessed with GA, so he's always talking about it. Like, but you know, if he'd approach a player like or something, probably one of the other members of the management would approach me as opposed to having my old man do it, like, just to keep things kind of professional, really.
Have you watched back any all games over the last few months? Cork have popped up quite a bit, and it's incredible the array of talent that's been there before. And like, if you did happen to watch them back, I'm sure it kind of crystallises just how close you've been in recent years and just how much the talent is there to try and get Cork back to that level that they were in the not too distant past.
Yeah, I suppose I haven't really watched too many games. The only one I watched was either 2004 or 2005 with like Tom Kenny, Ben O'Connor, Jerry O'Connor, all them, Sully, and then. But I haven't really watched many of our games. I suppose, yeah, with regard to getting back up there, it's only a poke of a ball really between the top 5 or 6 teams. Like, it's if you look at it, the team that ever won an All Ireland, like Limerick, when they beat us. 6 up, and then they went on to win the All Ireland. As I said, it's all on the day really. Like, you kind of need that bit of luck, and you need to be on your toes. Like, so it's usually a lot of the games are kind of 1 or 2 point margins. Like, so there's very little between the top few teams. Like,
in a way, was last winter a little bit easier to take than the previous winter because, as you mentioned, you had that fairly crushing defeat to Limerick in 2018.
Yeah, I suppose obviously that was disappointing, and then we had the 21 All Ireland as well, so obviously that was an added disappointment. But look, so there's no point dwelling on the past really. We ended up going into that winter then and winning a Fitzgibbon, so it was a nice little turnaround. But look, I wouldn't really reflect too much on those kind of games. Like, so as you can't really change it, there's no point getting down over it. You can only kind of live in the moment, I suppose, and try fix things, I suppose, going forward.
It's very true. Well, you've got plenty of opportunities to fix those things over the next couple of months. Shane Kingston, been great catching up. Thanks a million.
OTB Sports Radio.
If you're feeling a little like you're going a bit stir crazy, take a break and listen to Richie's Isolation Mix. 1 hour of ad-free music every day from midday on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM. The OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
Brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
Okay, I'm delighted to say we've got Dublin R&B singer-songwriter Erica Cody with us for our latest OTB Culture Hall of Fame. It is brought to you in association with Now TV, where you can stream every episode of the unmissable new show Gangs of London on the Now TV entertainment pack, which also has a 14-day free trial that you can avail of. Watch whatever you are in the mood for on Now TV right now. You can find our previous episodes as well on the OTB Podcast Network or on our YouTube channel. So just a handful of them so far. We've had Dermot Kennedy on talking about Gladiator. We've had Stephanie Preisner on talking about the US Office. Kenny Cunningham talking about Fawlty Towers was a good one. Louisa Harland was on to talk about Gomorrah. Lenny Abrahamson was one of our recent ones on Detectorists, and many more besides. You can get them all on our YouTube channel at the moment. So, Erica, we've had sports people on this slot. We've had artists on this slot. Which are you really? Are you a basketball player or are you an R&B artist?
Oh, well, listen, they're all my big loves. Music and basketball were about my big loves. So, you know, I can't really put either one of them on the back burner.
You will obviously be far better known for the incredibly successful music career to date. Talk to us about the sporting career and the sporting life you had.
Yeah, I think it was inevitable for me to play basketball. My dad was a professional basketball player, and he came over here in the 80s. So, yeah, when he came over here, it was like basketball was massive. It was the next best place to go. So obviously he was sent over here after he sustained an injury, and kind of all the NBA offers were off the table because the stocks went lower, especially with injury. So he came over here. Ireland was the next best place to go. And then fast forward to 1996, I was born. Yeah, and the rest is history. You know, it's been a massive part of my life. I really got into, well, I was always juggling. I was kind of one of those kids that was in everything. You know, I was in stage school, I was playing tennis, I was horse riding, I was playing basketball. But it kind of got down to, you know, it was really just basketball and music. They were the two things that I really loved. Everything else was like extracurricular, either after school or something to do during an evening on a weekday. And then basketball and music were my sole thing during the weekends. So yeah, it was, I love what basketball taught me. I love the discipline. I love the, I'm a really bad loser, and I think I've always taken that into every kind of aspect of my life, especially when it comes to music. You know, I only feel like I'm as good as my last game. I only feel like I'm as good as my last gig or my last piece of work. So it's that's a great motivator for me. But yeah, it was just one of those things that was like, I was thrown into it, and I just had like this natural ability for it. And yeah, when I was about 5, I started really playing when I was, as I was saying, like I was constantly juggling the two. Like I'd literally be going from like doing a dance class to going to a basketball match, literally. So then, and that was like through the ages of like 8 to 12, I'd say.
Right.
And then by the time I was like 13, 14, 15, I was like, I actually really love basketball. And it was one of those things that kind of came natural to me. So I was like, right, let's just see where this can go. So I started playing at we had like our under 18s national cup. That's like the big cup that you play for every year nationally. And then, yeah, I just kind of started taking it really seriously, especially throughout school. I didn't have time to go out doing what everyone else was doing in school because I was too busy playing basketball. I trained like 2 nights a week, then games on the weekends. And then as I got older, it became more of my life.
Sure.
And I was still obviously, you know, I was still singing and, you know, doing all that stuff as well. But then when I got to about 18, that's when I was like, okay, I started playing Super League. I was in college. I went to DAM to study music, and I was getting to do the two things that I loved, because my dad was always saying to me, he was like, well, like, if you want to go to America to play, like, we can make that happen. So I was going to go for my transition year. And there was just something that was just telling me that was like, you know what? I went to go and visit like my dad's old high school in the States. I was going to go there,
right?
Just for the year. And then I just didn't feel like I was ready for that kind of commitment. So I stayed here, and then it was like, well, do you want to go to college in the States? And then I was kind of thinking like, oh, do I really want to go on like a Division 1 or Division 2 scholarship? Because, you know, if I go in one of them, it's like basketball has to be everything. You know, it's not, I wouldn't really get time to be doing music and all that other stuff. So I was like, well, at least if I stay here, I can go and get my degree in music. I can be around music all the time while also playing basketball and playing at a really high level. So that's what I decided to do. I stayed here, went to them, juggled a hell of a lot, like probably too much. Yeah, so when I was playing Super League, it was like, okay, three nights a week, first of all, for training. And then weekends were games, and you could be anywhere in the country, because with Super League you travel, you're playing different teams from all around the country. So then once, yeah, it kind of just got to a point that I think I was 18. I was either 18 or 19, but I was playing Super League for like 2 years at this point, because I would have played up when I was like 17 on the team. But then we were playing in like a quarterfinal for the National Cup, and then I remember just like catching the ball, and then my knee went one way and then I went the other, and then it was just kind of game over. That was my ACL done. I had to get surgery. That kept me out for a year, and it was really intensive. It was like, you know, you really had to just teach your leg how to do everything again. So that was like hop, skip, jump, walk, bend, all those kinds. So it was really invasive and really intense. And it just kind of, I just felt like that was some sort of awakening for me. It was kind of like, okay, my body is literally just telling me to stop. I'm juggling way too much. I'm going from gigs to training, or from training to gigs. It was a lot to handle, I think, on my body too. And as much as I love the game, it just kind of got to a point I was like, okay, I'm a big girl now. I'm in college. I really need to figure out what I want to do. And obviously basketball here is an amateur sport, so it can only take you so far. And you don't get paid for it. You really just do it out of the love for the sport. And I absolutely love the game, but it just came to a point I was like, okay, I have to put my big girl pants on now and figure out what I want to do. And then that was music. So that whole year that I was at, I think it was 2016 that I did my knee, And I took that whole year and I was like, well, I'm the kind of person, my mantra is literally just like every negative comes positive. And don't sit and dwell on the negative. So I was like, right, I'm going to really take this year to focus on what I really wanted to do, which is music. So I started writing loads, I was producing more, linking in with producers in the States, and then that's kind of where my EP came from, Leoness, and that was an accumulation of songs over the last few years. So yeah, and then that's just kind of how the cookie crumbled, and now we're here. And it's been a whirlwind, yeah.
What a sliding doors moment you must think that decision to not go to the United States was.
Yeah, what was the decision?
Yeah, the decision to not pursue a Division 1 team or something like that in the US.
Yeah, for me, it was just like, I just knew I wouldn't. I knew deep down in my heart, I was like, I wouldn't be able to do music as much as I want to. As much as I was really good at basketball, and that could have more than likely happened. It was somebody else's dream, I felt, and it was, I feel like it wasn't for me at that moment in time, especially moving my whole life to go and live in the States. I don't think I was ready. I knew myself I wasn't ready. I didn't think I was even mature enough to go. And I knew I had a lot of growing to do, and I wanted to really kind of, make my mark here, while also, trying to get into like the UK scene and the US scene or whatever the case may be. And that's what was important to me, was to do that as well. And in the midst of that as well, like my little brother was born. I have a 5-year-old brother, and I was like, I missed out on so much time with him too if I was to go and do my degree in the States. And, everything worked out for the best. It really did.
It's interesting that you mentioned you did all of these activities as a kid, all the different sports, stage school, as well as music. We often have sports people on the show, and they talk about how you can cross-pollinate so well when it comes to skills. But it's not just down to skills. There's a huge benefit to having all these different things going on in your life. Of course, once you reach your late teens, you have to specialize if you want to be good at something. But I'm sure you look back in your childhood and say, what a great opportunity I had to be involved in all these sort of things.
Well, that's it. I really count my blessings, especially with that. Because my mom and my dad were they were really athletic people. Like my mom was a gymnast and a squash player, all-Ireland gymnast and a squash player. My dad was really into basketball. When I spend the weekends with him, that's what we did. My summers were with my dad as well, basketball camps all the time. And then my grandparents were loved tennis. So they were like, hey, we'll put her into the tennis club too, and so she can, get lessons and whatever. So that was something that I have to really vouch for them, but they're the reason why I was, so heavily involved in extracurricular activities, It's so very blessed.
We should talk about your father for just a brief moment here. Gerald Kennedy.
I love that.
There's a great piece done with him in Kieran Shannon in the Irish Examiner 2 years ago, because that was, what would it have been, the 30th anniversary of his buzzer beater in 1988. The 74-yard shot for Neptune when they were doing their 4 in a row. He was an All-American at high school level, would have been in the same summer leagues as Michael Jordan.
So they actually would have played with each other a lot of the time, because especially with everything going on now, it's like it's made me want to ask more questions. And then obviously when we were The Last Dance, when that came out, it was like I'd asked so many more questions about that. I was like, Dad, tell me more. I don't actually ask you enough of it. Like, you used to always tell me when I was younger, but I didn't appreciate hearing it then. I was like, he's such a dreamer or whatever, which just isn't the case at all. Like, he's literally like a walking history book. It's mad. I had loads of questions after that. I was like, it's like, what was your relationship with him and stuff? He was like, we used to play against each other all the time. They would play summer leagues together. He was like, I've one of the first pair of Jordans in the attic that he gave me. Like, it's mad. It's mental. And I'm like, what? Like, you're all the way over here. Like, how does that correlate? It's mad. But yeah, no, it's really cool. Really cool.
Is it true that he toured Scottie Pippen around Dublin once?
That's another question that I have to ask now.
It's in the Irish Examiner piece.
Know more than me. There you go. Yeah, that probably is true.
It is interesting that you mentioned your father is a walking history book, because I've always been interested in this about the basketball players who've come from the States to Ireland, about how in touch with their roots they are and how accessible that is for you as a daughter of somebody who grew up in South Carolina, a very racist South Carolina. Not that things have changed. Did you have many conversations with your father about that in the past? And I presume over the last little while, over the last couple of years, maybe Ferguson, and certainly now in the last couple of weeks, those questions have intensified.
Yeah, so like the thing is that I remember my dad having to teach me about my blackness, and I didn't understand because I was in a predominantly white community, and he was the only person that would be teaching me about my heritage because it was first hand. But he never really got into the racism that he faced in America, and we still haven't really gotten into that. I've mainly been asking like my aunt, not even my grandmother as much. We did like a legacy video with her, and it was basically everyone was able to ask her questions about her upbringing and all that kind of stuff. But it's really deeply rooted. I didn't realize how deeply rooted it was even in my family. Like my great grandfather was shot and killed at a baseball game by a white cop. He was an umpire. All for the colour of his skin. And a third cousin of mine as well, my aunt was telling me, he was shot and killed as well 12 years ago by a cop. So it's just, it's been a massive awakening for me, because this is something that I've felt so passionately about for so many years, and felt like I could never really have these conversations, because every time I'd have them, they'd be diminished, or I'd be asked questions. People would question what I'm saying on my experience. So it kind of just taught me to just kind of keep my mouth shut, I suppose, in a way. But my dad would mainly talk to me about like the racism that he's faced here, because this is my reality. And it's only now that I'm kind of like, I want to get into it more on his side from when he was growing up. And the thing is, it's hard to even bring up, because I know it's so, especially in South Carolina, it's still so divided. I felt anyway when I was over there a couple of years ago. But yeah, I remember him literally just having to like sit me down and teach me about my blackness, because it was one of those things that was always diminished, because people used to say, like, I was really heavily bullied in school, like physically and emotionally. It was, they'd always tell me that, like, oh, you're not white enough because like your dad's black, but you're not black enough because you don't live with your dad, and like all these crazy things that I'd be like, but I feel a certain type of way. And I always felt like this closeness towards my dad's family too, because I felt like if I ever wanted to speak about it, they could relate, and it wasn't a conversation that was really here a lot of the time. But with that said, it was like my nana and my mom were like always in my primary school. I remember it was always something. It was always to do with either racial slurs all the time in school, being bullied, people shouting monkey noises at you every day in school. It was very overwhelming. And it's like I know that because my nana would tell me stories of her having to go into my school all the time, because it was unbearable most of the time. And it's one of those things that I'm like, okay, if I can use my platform in a way that can highlight the racism that's actually here too. Like, racism doesn't have borders, and that's what people need to understand, is that like it affects us very much too, and it's very well on our shores. And I'm sure you've noticed over like the last week or so that the amount of people that are coming out with their stories, and which is great, because for a long time we haven't been able to come out about our stories. And it was only last year that I started really, opening up about it. I've been talking about it, but musically, when I wrote Where You're Really From, that was like, I felt like I had a weight off my chest. And that came from a place of somebody asking me constantly, where am I really from? And it was happening in work. It was happening bloody anywhere I went. It was just exhausting. So for me, being able to put that into a song was very therapeutic.
It's interesting because Gina Akpa-Moses made that exact same point last week when she was on the show, and she said that as an Irish athlete, despite wearing the green of Ireland, she would still have those questions, where are you really from? Yeah. How much of an issue do we have in Ireland in terms of facing up to the fact that we still have a huge racist element in terms of our behaviour?
People just need to want to learn. They need to, open their eyes to what we're saying. We're not saying this just for the fun of it. Like, these are our stories, and this is the stuff that we have to deal with. Day in and day out, everyone's experiences can be totally different too. I know for me, it was a weekly thing. Some people face it every single day. You know, so it's really just about, you know, being willing to learn and taking the information and taking the stories that we're saying, because this isn't coming from a place of just jumping on a bandwagon. Like, this is not a bandwagon. This is like a real human issue, and it's not just a black people problem. It's a humanity problem.
For sure. And have you seen anything over the last week or 10 days that has suggested that the view of white people is more than a bandwagon sensation, that there is force for change, and there will be a force for change either in the United States or here in Ireland?
Oh, 100%. I think that's definitely going to show. You know, it's a lot more than just posting a black square. You really have to, you know, have these uncomfortable conversations with family, with friends, because it's one of those things that's like, oh, well, Ireland's not racist, and it's like, you need to understand the circumstances of a black person in Ireland, and when they tell you that there's racism here, there's racism here. It's not, that's a privilege being able to turn a blind eye to it, but it's not a privilege for us to live it. So it's important for people to, you know, read up on, don't take the word white privilege as a bad thing, just take it and use it and learn from it, and see if you're concerned over what it means, Google it. You know, you don't need to constantly be asking a black person or a person of colour to constantly explain themselves or explain what this means or that means. Like, that doesn't have to come straight from our mouth. That can come from literally the touch of a button on your phone. Because the thing is, like, people of colour right now are really tired. I know last week was extremely overwhelming and exhausting for me, not only because was my heart like ridiculously heavy for my family in the States. Like, I couldn't say I was okay because I didn't feel okay, because I knew my family weren't okay. To the point that they were like, I'm afraid to get in the car and go to work in case I'm just stopped by the wrong person at the wrong time. My auntie told me stories about her literally driving through KKK meetings and praying to God that she wouldn't run out of gas or get a flat tire. And this is recently too. There's just not as many there now. So it's really alive. And there's things that I didn't even realize in terms of like American racism, how much it's still alive, until I really heard it coming straight from my family there too. So it's a massive awakening for everyone. And, you know, I still have a lot that I want to learn. I want to read more. I want to learn way more about my Black history, because that's one thing I was never taught in school. See, it's all these things. Like, there's so many ways that we can help try and, well, this conversation is not going to die. As long as I'm breathing, I will not let this conversation die here, especially. And that's why I say, like, I want to use my platform in a way that's beneficial and, you know, can spread awareness over this until, you know, we really do start to see change.
Did you ever experience racism as a basketballer?
I did once. I remember someone called me the N-word, and then that was it. This was years ago now. I just remember because I was like looking at old tweets of mine and stuff, and I remember I came across a tweet or a status or something like that from Facebook. But it was all the time, it was like it was brushed off because it was nearly like deemed casual. It's like, no, like it's not casual. This is where it has to start as well, is like calling out casual racism if you're in a group of friends, and calling out your friends or family that are racist. Like, that's where it needs to start, and it starts at home too, especially with younger kids. I've had so many amazing parents messaging me, and teachers as well, that are like, I definitely want to take this into the classroom, the information you're sharing, or that I'm having these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations with my 10-year-old or my 8-year-old or my 7-year-old. Because it's like, it's time to have these uncomfortable conversations now, because we've all been uncomfortable for years trying to talk about this, especially in a predominantly white community where you just automatically think the worst, that no one wants to listen to you after years of, you know, your experiences being diminished.
It's very interesting that you mention about learning a bit more about Black history, and I wonder if that should become more part of our education in this country. That, like, there was a big debate last year, was it about abolishing history from curricula in Ireland? And obviously that was a ridiculous idea. And we often point the finger at Britain and say they don't know a thing about the famine and they don't know a thing about Ireland, and therefore they can't appreciate the attitudes that have been shown from the Irish towards the British over a period of years. The same has to be said when it comes to white people, and especially in Ireland and in the UK, when it comes to white people's view of Black people, because there is that, or towards racism, I should say, because of that lack of education, the lack of understanding of the history of the subject. Exactly, and that's exactly it. I think the racism here is more from a lack of education, and it can come from a place of ignorance sometimes. That's what I found, because I've seen white America and I've seen white Ireland, and they're two totally different places.
because the racism in America is just so deeply rooted, and that's what it's built on. So that's why everything is going to have to be rebuilt in America, because it's so deeply rooted. Like, you're talking over 400 years, like it's insane. But here it's more so, it's just a lack of education, and that's why I think it's really important, especially now that we can talk about this and maybe open up to like schools and stuff to add like Black history to curriculums, especially for Leaving Cert students. I think is really important. Because like I remember, doing history in school, and none of it was about, where I came from, and it leaves you confused, especially when you're mixed race. You feel like you're stuck in the middle. So yeah, it's a weird one. But I think it's mainly down to ignorance in some cases and lack of education. And this has definitely been a massive eye opener to people, coming to either my Instagram or whatever, and just saying, look, I don't want you to explain. I just want to thank you for opening my eyes, and that I'm reading, I'm educating myself, and I'm signing petitions, I'm donating, and I'm talking to my family and friends about this, and that's what's really important too, because that's where it all starts.
For sure. And it's great to see a platform being used in such an amazing way, because we have tons of these conversations as well, and about sports people too, when it comes to using a platform, or what is the compelling reason to use your platform? Should you be compelled to use your platform? And it's funny that we've been chatting about Michael Jordan for the last little while, and how that was such a big question around him when Republicans buy sneakers too was the quote of the early 90s. At the same time, a white person around that time wouldn't have got nearly the amount of questions about them were they apolitical. Michael Jordan may just be apolitical. I'd be interested to get your view on that.
Like in terms of what's going on now, because actually what's funny is that I saw a famous Irish sports star, he put up a tweet and it said, he was like, right, just waiting on Tiger now to say something. And it just really hit a nerve with me, because I was like, I'm not waiting on my Black legends and Black heroes to come out and speak about this. They're so tired. They're tired too, just because they're on a pedestal and they're these icons. You shouldn't be sitting here waiting for them to come out and say something that has been so deeply rooted within the country that they live in, but also with them. And that was one thing that it just didn't sit well with me at all. And that's important to understand as well, is that like you shouldn't be waiting on a Black person to come out, and no matter what their status is, to come out and say something about what's going on. Because I know for me, it was a really, really, this is just me personally to give you perspective, it was a really exhausting week. It was like non-stop crying all day, every day for the whole week. Getting on the phone to my aunts in America, and literally we'd open the phone and it was just crying. We'd have to cry first before we could even speak. And it was just, it's just one of those things that it's like, please don't wait on Black people to have to share this hurt all the time, especially when it comes to a modern day lynching like with George Floyd. That was heavy on a whole nother level. So it's easy to, that's again, it comes down to privilege, it's easy to say, oh, just waiting on Michael now. Try and understand the hurt and the pain. You can never fully feel it or understand it, especially if, you're not a person of colour, but you can feel outraged, especially after watching that video. Like, if you're a human being and you watch that video, there's something really wrong, and wrong with racism. And it's just opened up the whole conversation. So it's just important to know that, like, look, just because your favourite Black sports star hasn't come out and said anything yet in the wake of this modern day lynching, like, don't sit here and wait. Don't be waiting by your phone to hear something, because it takes time and it's not easy to talk about. It's like literally pouring salt in an old wound. Because I know even for me, it's brought up so much trauma from the stuff that I dealt with in school that I never actually got to deal with, because I felt like I couldn't really talk about it. I could only talk about my mum and my dad and my grandparents or whatever the case, because they were there, they could see the hurt because they were my family. But as far as it went, it was like everything else became diminished. I shouldn't be crying over what I went through. So that's where, I think that's an important look to have on things like that, especially.
One of the last things I wanted to touch on this from an Irish perspective is our incredible ability in this country to turn a blind eye to this. That it's frustrating. There was a headline in the Sunday Independent at the weekend saying there's no racism here, and we white Irish people are saying it again and again, which is obviously the tongue-in-cheek way about how we're all in denial about this. Are you getting hope that things are changing a little bit? Like, to use this case, I mean, the Versatile story has been very, very interesting. That this is not a new story. Anybody who knows their music and knows their Irish music knows that this is not a new story. However, this has exploded into the mainstream media over the past 2 weeks. Does that in a certain way give you hope that people are no longer going to tolerate not just implicit racism, because this is not implicit, but perhaps more insidious versions that aren't exactly on the surface?
100%. And I think that it gives me hope because we're still such a young country, and seeing what we've achieved in the last 5 years with the referendums we've had especially, goes to show that, you know, we do want change. And most of us are really willing and ready for change. So it's important. It's important to keep having this conversation, because it's not one of those things that's just going to die down now. Especially that everyone feels comfortable to share their stories and their experiences. I think sometimes it takes an Irish person to know a black person to actually understand what they're going through, to hear their experiences of what they've gone through. So I think it's important now, especially with Louise O'Neill. Like, I have to thank her for handing over her column space so I could tell my story and reach out to the next person. So I think that's the kind of momentum we need. And like, in regards to like the Versatile stuff, I was calling them out on that stuff last year, and nothing was done about it. There was no apologies. There was no pulling them down off the website. And it takes for something like this to happen for people to like, oh, this is actually really bad. You know, it's like, this is bad for a long time, and it was just being people were just being complicit to it. But there's no room for complicity now at all. It's either you're anti-racist or you're not. It's plain and simple. It's like, if racism doesn't sit well with you, what are you going to do to become anti-racist and make sure that nobody else has to experience it again? Like, are you going to step up for someone if you see it happening in public? That's where it starts too. Because a lot of the time it's like, when you do shout at someone after they called you the N-word or whatever, it's like, then you're the person who's looked at, not them. And there's been so many situations with that. A friend of mine, Jane, she put up on her Instagram as well, and she was like, I looked like the crazy person because he called me the N-word, and I was the one who's screaming at him for calling me that, and nobody said anything, not one person. So that's where it starts too. It's like, I know it's kind of awkward and you don't want to do it in front of your friends, a lot of with the case of some people, but it's like, there comes a time and a place where things can be tolerated and they can't. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just that simple.
How do Versatile's lyrics and their blackface go so long without getting this level of outrage, is one question. Is it because people feel that because they're not the person who have written those lyrics or not performing those lyrics, they feel that they aren't partaking in it, even though they've, say, bought a ticket to see them or listening to them on Spotify? I don't know. I'd just love to hear your take on that.
It's a good question. I don't know how it's gone on this long. Because I know when I see someone in blackface, I don't think it's funny. And I know a lot of people in this country know what blackface is. It's not an excuse to say I was so young and I didn't know what blackface was, and you're 17 and you're dressing up as EDE. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. And especially when you're a guest in a culture, that's what annoys me, is that, like, understand where the genre that you're sitting in right now, where it comes from. And it wasn't made for this. It wasn't made so you could fetishize and dehumanize a black woman in an art form that is created by black folk. So when you're a guest in a culture, it comes with a certain amount of respect you have to give back to that culture. And if anything, they've been disrespecting this culture for a very long time. And that came with a post that they posted to George Floyd. And it was the biggest load of, I could say whatever curse words right now, but I won't. And reading that was like, okay, you actually really don't care. You really don't care. This is for your own gain. The fact you can silence black people in your comments and delete their comments when they spark outrage over a really disrespectful post from a man who just lost his life from having a white policeman's knee on his neck. That does not sit well with me either. And then for an apology to come out a week later saying that this is just part of the characters that we play. I was really young. I didn't know. I could try and quote the whole thing, and I'd honestly just be wasting my time, because that's what it was. It was a waste of time, and it was a PR stunt, and it's still really disrespectful. And for me, it was, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, you're just saying this because you don't want to get kicked off the Snoop Dogg show. when in reality it's an absolute joke. You were put on the bill in the first place with the lyrics that you have to open. It just goes to show there probably wasn't any thought that really went into putting them on the bill. They just saw numbers and they put them on the bill, and that was it. They saw they sold as 3 Arena and put them on the bill, and that was it. Because when you Google Irish hip hop, they're the first people who come up, and that's not what we stand for at all. And that's not what the scene here stands for either. There's some really good hip hop, and a lot of those include white Irish rappers too, including Kojak and Rushes and everything else. Like, there's so many amazing other places that you can be looking that would be much better to be selling out a 3 Arena than those misogynistic, homophobic and racist lyrics. Because at the end of the day, there's people that are buying into that and singing back to that, and that does no good. That's a really young, impressionable audience. So it'd be better if they tried to use the privilege they have right now with their audience to try and educate them, instead of saying that, like, oh yeah, we're sorry or whatever, we were real young. Like, that's bullshit. Do you know what I mean? It's not. That's just not it.
Yeah, for sure.
Try and make a real change.
Absolutely. We're going to continue this conversation because I should mention the OTB Culture Hall of Fame is brought to you in association with Now TV, where you can stream every episode of the unmissable news show Gangs of London on the Now TV Entertainment Pass, which also has a free trial for 14 days that you can avail of. You can watch whatever you're in the mood for now on Now TV. This is the OTB Culture Hall of Fame. Our guest every week has the opportunity to put a piece of art into the Culture Hall of Fame.
Oh, there's a book. Well, there's obviously Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Jabiri, and there's a non-fiction one that's kind of I haven't read it yet. I've just heard lots of great things about it, and it's called Queenie. So yeah, there's two books I definitely recommend for people to listen to if they want to, read, whether it's an audiobook or read, whatever. Yeah, I'd highly recommend them.
Brilliant. Well, there's some fantastic recommendations. Before we let you go, Erica, we should chat about music. How have the last 3 months been for somebody who survives in gigs, or at least that's your bread and butter when it comes to revenue?
Yeah. It's been very tough, taking a hard hit to the live industry here, especially. It's given me a lot of time to, just kind of, because you get so caught up in, what's next, when's the next release, and all that kind of stuff. This obviously just made the world stop. And it kind of, as a creative, your brain doesn't really stop. So at least it's been great to try and write more, I suppose, but obviously not without having to put pressure on myself because I don't have deadlines to meet or whatever. So it's kind of just been able to get back to, things that I've actually loved to do that now that I've time to do it. Well, also giving me that space. Like, I think I needed that space because I became so like, I need to write, I need to do this, I need to do that. When in reality, it's like, I'm not going to get any good song out of putting pressure on myself like that. So at least being able to be given the time to do things that I enjoy, whether it's playing a game on my computer or going for a walk with my dogs, or things that I just really haven't had a chance to do because I'm so busy, have given me the space that creative space to gain that back. Because obviously it's like when you're locked in your house for 3 months, there's only so much you can be inspired by. I get inspired by life experiences and going out and, meeting new people. I'm a real people person. I love meeting new people. So that's been really hard in terms of like creativity and all that. But with everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, it's been like, ding, I've nothing but things to talk about now.
Right.
It's just taken 2.5 months.
Yeah, like it's remarkable, even the new Run the Jewels album, which is an unbelievable turnaround time to include a lot of what's happened in recent weeks and to get that out so quickly. Like, we were all sitting here thinking, we can't wait for the COVID-19 creative boom. Forget that. It's going to be about a creative boom that's going to be way bigger than this.
Yeah. Like, to be honest, the ones that I made myself write in quarantine are like, they're garbage. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to put them out. It was something that I was like, oh yeah, this could be like a cute little quarantine song, and it's just not it at all. So I think I'm back to where I started, as in like the music that I want to make, and that's about like my struggles and where my heart really lies.
Sure.
So yeah, that's obviously the last like week has sparked a lot of inspiration. It's made me want to talk a lot more, especially having spoken about it on TV and radio and in the newspaper. Is like, hey, we're actually being heard this time. Like, back when I released Where You're Really From, I was only heard from a minority, and that was my minority. But now it's like, hey, everyone's listening. So I have a lot I want to say.
Yeah, great stuff. And any sign of getting back on stage again? Like we're talking in sport a lot at the moment about trying to get people back into stadiums, but we're talking maybe quarter capacity, maybe half capacity if the 2 metre rule is reduced. But I presume most gigs in Dublin need full capacity to even make it worthwhile financially.
Exactly, that's the thing, and it's like from an artist perspective, like you make your money off the ticket sales too, and singing your music live. So that would definitely hit hard. It's one of those things. It's just everything's so unsure. Like I'm dying to do a gig again, but like I also want everyone to be safe. So it's just one of those things. We're just gonna have to see how it goes. And maybe see. I know there's been like a lot of like online live concerts and stuff, but like there's nothing like getting up and singing in front of a full crowd of people instead of numbers behind a phone. So we're just going to have to wait and see how it goes. Like, of course, I'll jump at the opportunity when it's safe to do so. But for now, I think it's important for everyone to, stay safe and keep our distance, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, fingers crossed that things keep trending in the right direction and we'll be able to go see you again sometime soon. I should mention you've been watching hopefully you've been watching the OTB Culture Hall of Fame, which is brought to you in association with Now TV, where you can stream every episode of the unmissable news show Gangs of London on the Now TV Entertainment Pass, which also has a 14-day free trial that you can avail of. Watch whatever you're in the mood for on Now TV now. Erica, Cody, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate that. Thank you.
The OTB Culture Hall of Fame.
Brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.